Chapter 1904. Of course it's true. Why would you think that? You're just imagining things. Li Jinan held onto the steering wheel and smiled helplessly. If second brother hears this, he'll chop me to death. Li Xiqing was very possessive. If he knew that someone wanted to lay a finger on his wife, he would definitely hack him to death. Even his younger brother was no exception. Even if it was just a misunderstanding, it wouldn't do. But I keep having this feeling. Yi Yu pouted slightly. Furthermore, I keep feeling that the words you say at home are ambiguous. What is it? What do you mean by saying that if it were any other woman, she would remarry? Are you trying to say that if it were me, I would remarry? Yi Yu's voice was laced with accusation, dissatisfaction, and grievance. Li Jinan felt wronged and said innocently, I didn't mean that. I just feel sorry for second sister-in-law. He turned to look at Yi Yu. Yi Yu's face looked haggard. It was obvious that she hadn't had a good rest. Li Jinan sighed softly and said, Honey, don't let your imagination run wild. I only love you, and you're the only one I have ever loved. There has never been anyone else. Yi Yu's expression softened when she heard that. However, there was still sadness in his eyes. Li Jinan looked at Yi Yu and continued. Back then, second sister-in-law managed second brother's company all by herself. It wasn't easy. When she was pregnant, she had to stay up late to look at the proposals and give her suggestions. At that time, second sister-in-law was pregnant with twins. Her belly was much bigger than the average pregnant woman's. She had more severe reactions, and her back and legs often hurt. She couldn't even sit still. Li Jinan's words were full of emotion. Originally, second sister-in-law didn't have to bear such a heavy responsibility. If second brother was here, second sister-in-law not only didn't have to do those things, but also could live a very relaxed and happy life. So, I feel sorry for second sister-in-law. You sure know a lot about it. Yi Yu's tone was a little sour as she turned her head away. Li Jinan chuckled and replied, At that time, only second sister-in-law and I were managing the company. Of course I knew. It's not an exaggeration to say that the reason I have the skills I have today is because of second sister-in-law's guidance. When Yi Yu heard that, she felt even more uncomfortable. So, Li Jinan and Su Qianxi had been together for 4 years. For 4 years, they faced each other and were together every day. It was no wonder that Li Jinan had a different feeling for her. Yu, if I had any feelings for second sister-in-law, something would have happened a long time ago. The only reason it hasn't happened is that the situation doesn't allow it. If the situation allowed it, you would have? Yu asked out of reflex. As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized that something was amiss. Yu secretly clicked her tongue in frustration. Li Jinan glanced at her and replied, There won't be such a time. Once she's second sister-in-law, she'll always be second sister-in-law. Sister-in-law can only be sister-in-law. She looked at him and softly said, I'm sorry. Chapter 1905. Li Jinan chuckled helplessly. What? Do all pregnant women like to let their imaginations run wild? Li Jinan didn't know what to do with her. He held his forehead and said, That's not what I meant. Yi Yu felt even more aggrieved and said, Let me tell you, if a man really comes to seduce me, I won't leave, Li Jinan. I believe that you won't. No, even if you die, I won't. Yi Yu interrupted him. I could be like second sister-in-law. Li Jinan couldn't help but laugh when he heard that. The car had already entered the neighborhood. Li Jinan drove steadily. The speed of the car wasn't fast. He slowly looked at the greenery around him. He was in a good mood. Yi Yu continued, Although I might not be able to manage such a big company as well as second sister-in-law, I will try my best. I will take good care of the child and raise him well. If that doesn't work, I will study. If second sister-in-law can do it, so can I. Yi Yu's eyes lit up. Li Jinan couldn't hold back his laughter. He stopped the car and leaned over the steering wheel to laugh. Yi Yu panicked and said, What are you laughing at? I'm serious. Are you hoping for me to die? Li Jinan asked with a laugh as he wiped his eyes. Yi Yu was annoyed when she heard that. She pinched his arm and said, You know what I mean. Ha ha ha. Li Jinan unbuckled his seatbelt and said, I know. but what you said will never happen. I'm just saying what if. There's no what if. Li Jinan leaned over and unbuckled Yi Yu's seatbelt. He gently said, "We can still love for a long time." His low voice was magnetic and flirtatious. Yi Yu's heart skipped a beat at that moment. She found herself looking into Li Jinan's deep, dark eyes. She fell. It was out of control. Li Jinan cupped her face with his large hands and kissed her gently. It was a light and gentle kiss. Yi Yu pursed her lips. Li Jinan quickly got out of the car and opened the door for her. He helped her out. Li Jinan looked at her belly. He was filled with the joy and excitement of being a father for the first time. "Do you think our child will be a boy or a girl?" Yi Yu asked. "Maybe a girl. It's probably a boy. Grandpa said it's impossible for it to be a girl. I like girls. It must be a girl." -3, 2, 1. The tender voice was like a sweet and sticky cotton candy. Li Jianyue turned around abruptly, but there was nothing behind her. A naughty smile appeared on his young face as he said, "Brothers, I'm here to look for you." However, there was still no movement in the empty living room. Li Jianyue was wearing a pink princess dress and a pink bow hairpin in her hair. Her round face was like a jade sculpture, and her big black grape-like eyes were rolling around. She tiptoed as she said, Brother Chu, Brother Mosen, where are you? Can you cough or sneeze?" No one answered. "I won't find you." Still, no one answered. With a crafty look on his face, he shouted into the air, "Aya, little Sue. You came at the right time. Come and help me find my brother." "No, Ursa can't cheat." Chapter 1906. Li Jianyue ran behind the curtains in the living room. Her crisp laughter was very eye-catching in the living room. She lifted the curtains, but didn't see anyone. Li Jianyue was a little unhappy. She walked all the way and shouted, "Brother Mosen, you little liar. Where are you? Ursa can't find you." However, no one answered. Li Jianyue walked forward a little discouraged. She turned left and right and finally went into the kitchen. The kitchen was clean and tidy. Li Jianyue walked in and shouted, "Brother Chu, Brother Mosen, brother, where are you?" As she shouted, she yawned. She opened a fridge and tiptoed to get herself a bottle of milk. She removed the straw and inserted it into the bottle. Then she started drinking. Li Jianyue sat on the sofa and felt deeply defeated. While drinking, Li Jianyue suddenly thought of a place. She took a step and went behind the stairs. Behind the stairs was a small storage room, in which there were a few toys that the children usually played with. Every time she played hide-and-seek, she wouldn't look for this place. Of course, she didn't find anyone. Li Jianyue felt that she was very quick-witted. She shouted proudly, "I know where you are." Her short legs moved, and she was already in front of the cubicle by the stairs. Li Jianyue twisted the door and walked in. However, the lights inside were on, but there was no one. Li Jianyue looked at the room, full of toys, and felt even more defeated. She could only close the door and then sighed. However, she suddenly thought of something and turned to open the door again. She looked behind the door. Indeed, a tall figure was behind the door. Li Jianyue was happy and was about to cheer when Yu Chulin immediately put his hand to his mouth and said, "Shoo." Seeing him like this, Li Jianyue felt that it was a little fun to be mysterious. She also put a finger to her mouth and said, "Shoo." Yu Chulin was older than them, so he was naturally taller than them. Seeing Li Jianyue's short body, Yu Chulin looked down and said, "Come in." Li Jianyue blinked her eyes, which were as big as black grapes, and stared at Yu Chulin. Yu Chulin was very fair. It was not as fair as Li Mosen's natural white complexion. Instead, it was the healthy skin of an Asian. She had a high-nosed bridge, red lips, and beautiful eyes. When Li Jianyue first saw Yu Chulin, she felt that he was very good-looking. When Li Jianyue heard him calling for her, she sneaked in mysteriously and asked, "Brother Chu, what are you doing here?" Yu Chulin took out an assembled tank that could fire a cannon with a press of a button. But now, the entire toy was in a mess, and it looked like it was broken. "Brother Chu, this is Brother Mosen's favorite toy. If you break it, Brother Mosen will be angry." Li Jianyue's eyes widened as she stared at the toy. There was a stern warning on her face, but at the same time, there was worry. "What should we do? Brother Mosen will be sad if he sees this." On Yu Chulin's fair face, his rosy lips were tightly pursed. There was an apologetic look on his childish face as he said, I accidentally touched it just now and fell. I'll fix it. Chapter 1907. Her? Help? Yu Chulin wanted to laugh. In the past, he had only heard Li Jianxian talk about his sister. According to his good friend, Li Jianxian, his sister only had 3 characteristics: stupid, silly, and silly. Yu Chulin had naively thought that Li Jianxian was just joking. He didn't expect that after a few days of interaction. She was indeed quite silly. However, it wasn't to the extent that Li Jianxian had described. Yu Chulin had never liked to play with girls since he was young. However, when he heard Li Jianyue's suggestion, he pursed his lips and nodded. Don't talk. Just sit and watch. Oh, does Brother Chu really know how to repair it? Li Jianyue found it a little unbelievable. I heard that the assembly of this tank is very complicated. Even when my father brought it back, it took him many minutes to assemble it. How many minutes is that? How many minutes? Li Jianyue couldn't tell. When she heard the question, she blushed and said, just many minutes. Yu Chulin laughed and sat down cross-legged again. Li Jianyue blinked her eyes at the way he was concentrating on his task. Brother Chu, your eyelashes are so long. Chu was indifferent. He stared at the thing in his hand and frowned slightly. Brother Chu, I've caught you. You'll be the ghost next. Okay, wait for me, Yu Chulin replied. He seemed a little troubled. Brother Chu, how did you know to hide here? Did my brother teach you that? Li Jianyue felt that it was very smart to think of hiding here. What was even more smart was that she actually thought of such a place to hide. She felt that she was even smarter. Yu Chulin responded calmly and stared at the tank in his hand. I knew it. Brother Chu, isn't my brother amazing? The adults say that my brother's grades are excellent. They say that my brother is very smart and can skip a grade next year. Li Jianyue rested her chin on her hand as she watched Yu Chulin's busy hands. She pouted and said, if only I could be as good as my brothers. I want the adults to praise me too. Brother Chu, do you feel happy when you're praised by the adults? Yu Chulin was speechless. Yu Chulin furrowed his eyebrows and looked up at her. When Li Jianyue saw that he was finally looking at her, she giggled and said, Brother Chu, were you dumb in the past too? Did you only become smart later on? No, I don't believe it. Li Jianyue pouted. Granny Rong said that every child has to learn. I'm very smart. It's just because my brothers are boys that I foolishly climb the stairs. You want to talk about stages, right? When Li Jianyue heard this, she immediately understood. She nodded and said with a smile, yes. The stage, the section of the ladder. Yu Chulin, Brother Chu, you haven't answered me yet. Do you feel happy when you're praised by the adults? I'm used to it. I don't feel anything. Yu Chulin's answer was simple and clear. Li Jianyue pouted. Brother said the same thing. Only Brother Mosen would tell me the truth. What did Mosen tell you? He said he was happy. He was as happy as when Ursu was praised. Li Jianyue smiled. Chapter 1908. Li Jianyue snorted. Brother Mosen would never lie to me. Brother Mosen is the best brother in the world. At the mention of Li Mosen, Li Jianyue got up and said, I'm not going to stay here with you. I'm going to play with Brother Mosen. Yu Chulin heaved a sigh of relief and said, all right, go ahead then. I'm almost done. I'll call you when I'm out. Li Jianyue was a little unhappy when she saw his relieved expression. She stomped her feet and walked out. Li Jianyue walked around outside and finally found Li Mosen behind the table. Aha, Brother Mosen, I found you. Li Mosen's blue eyes looked at Li Jianyue. He smiled helplessly and said, it's my turn. No, it's Brother Chu's turn. Li Jianyue was a little proud. The first person I found is Brother Chu. Where is he? He's in the toy room. He's fixing something. There was a flash of surprise in Li Mosen's clear and pure eyes. Why? Li Jianyue realized that she seemed to have spilled the beans and immediately covered her mouth. Let's go take a look. Li Mosen took Li Jianyue's hand and went to the toy room. Yu Chulin had just finished repairing the toy. He heaved a huge sigh of relief after he carefully placed it back in its original position. As soon as he walked out of the door, he saw Li Jianyue and Li Mosen. Yu Chulin frowned. He was a little unhappy and said, "Didn't I say that I'll fix it? I'll apologize to Mosin after I fix it." Yuchulin's tone was a little fierce. Li Jianyue shrank her neck in grievance and said, "I know. Why are you so fierce?" Li Mosin was unhappy. "Ursu only said that you were repairing something here. What did you break just now?" "I'm sorry." Yuchulin looked at Li Mosin and said, "I accidentally knocked over your toy, but I've fixed it now. I'll get it for you." "What is it?" "The tank," Li Jianyue exclaimed. "Brother Chu is amazing. He actually fixed the tank." His small face was full of worship. When Li Mosin saw this, he felt a little uncomfortable and said, "Ursu, I know how to repair it too." Li Jianyue giggled and said, "But I'm not as good as Daddy. Daddy is much better." The corners of Chulin's lips curled up slightly. Then he turned around and retrieved the small tank that he had painstakingly repaired. Li Mosin took a look. Little tank's body was painted black, and there was a patch where some of the paint had clearly fallen off. Feeling a little heartache, he said, "It's broken." Yuchulin looked over. It was true. With an apologetic look on his face, he said, "I'm really sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. I've already fixed it, so it shouldn't affect your use. However, if you still mind, I can buy an identical one for you and install it for you." Li Mosin stared at the small tank in his hand and felt uncomfortable. "There's no need," Li Jianyue said. "Brother Mosin isn't petty. You've already apologized. Brother Mosin is the most generous. He'll definitely forgive you. Am I right, Brother Mosin?" Li Jianyue looked as if she had seen through everything. There was pride on her small face. Li Mosin nodded. "Yes, it's all right." Yuchulin smiled gently and said, "Thank you, Mosin." The two boys looked at each other with a faint smile on their faces. Chapter 1909. A Sleepless Night. Yi Qianqian slept in the guest room and felt her body aching. The intensity from last night had not completely dissipated today. Tomorrow was New Year's Eve. As the new year approached, Yi Qianqian felt nervous. Her heart was beating so fast that she couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard she tossed and turned. Suddenly, the phone on the bedside table vibrated. It was a WeChat message. "Shun Julia, are you asleep?" Yi Qianqian glanced at the time. It was already past 1 in the morning. Picking it up, he let out a long sigh and replied, "No. Shun Julia, I'm coming for you." Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. She felt that something was wrong. Just as she was about to text Shun Julia not to come, she heard a knock on the door. When Yi Qianqian heard the knock on the door, a look of reluctance crossed her face. Shun Julia lay on the bed, pretending to be a corpse. Very quickly, he began to knock again. Resigned to her fate, Yi Qianqian stood up and opened the door. Shun Julia was only wearing a set of long-sleeve pajamas. When he saw Yi Qianqian, he smiled brightly. He walked up and put his arm around Yi Qianqian's waist. "I can't sleep," he said. Yi Qianqian was shocked and instinctively looked behind Shun Julia. Behind him, there was nothing. She breathed a sigh of relief. "That's right, it's already past 1 o'clock in the morning. How could there still be anyone around?" She closed the door and turned around. Before she could take a good look at Shun Julia, he had already picked her up. He turned around and pressed her down onto the bed. Yi Qianqian exclaimed. Shun Julia pressed her down and whispered, "I'll sleep with you." Yi Qianqian struggled for a moment and said, "This bed is so small. It'll be too cramped for 2 people. Why don't you come to my place?" Shun Julia got up and gazed at her with his amber eyes. "Let's go. Let's sleep together. It'll be easier to sleep." "No," Yi Qianqian objected. "It wouldn't be good if Grandma saw it. She might even be criticized." She didn't want it. Shun Julia laid on top of her like a corpse and said, "Let's sleep like this then. It'll save space to sleep on top of each other." With a look of disdain, Yi Qianqian said, "Go away. Don't you know how heavy you are?" Shun Julia chuckled. He hugged her and narrowed his eyes as he said, "Qianqian, what are you doing?" Yi Qianqian looked over with rapt attention. Shun Julia snuggled up to her and whispered, "What should I do? I want you." Yi Qianqian blushed and said, "Are you crazy? This is your house." Shun Julia didn't care. He reached out and caressed her body, which was only wearing a thin nightgown. Yi Qianqian pressed his hand down and said, If you continue to do this, I'll get angry. Shinjilia didn't act rashly. He lay down flat and said, I can't sleep. I slept too long during the day. Well, it's New Year's Eve tomorrow. Yi Qianqian turned to look at him, and Shinjilia turned to look at her as well. When their eyes met, Yi Qianqian felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction in her heart. Shinjilia chuckled and said, There's an event tomorrow. Someone will be coming to look for Grandma. They're all elders, so don't be nervous. Just go through it with a calm heart. Why are you looking for Grandma? I don't know. They come every year. Aren't guests usually on the second day of the new year? Isn't that a little too early? Yi Qianqian found it a little strange. Wasn't New Year's Eve usually a day for family reunions? This old lady was really different from ordinary people. Chapter 1910. Will Grandma's friend be as difficult to deal with as Grandma? Don't worry. Shinjilia laughed and looked at Yi Qianqian. He seemed to be comforting her, but at the same time, he gloated and said, They won't be more difficult to deal with than our old lady. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She sighed and said, It's so difficult. Huh? Shinjilia looked up at her. I have a feeling that God doesn't like me, and that's why he wants to torture me like this. Don't think that way. Shinjilia looked up at Yi Qianqian and said seriously, What if God thinks you're easy to bully? Yi Qianqian glared at him and extended her leg to give him a kick. Shinjilia laughed and hugged her. Let's go to sleep. I'm sleepy. Go back to your place. It'll be ugly if your parents see you. Not good. What are you afraid of? Shinjilia snuggled into her arms and said, You've already come home with me for the new year. The elders already know what it means. They won't be bothered by it. Although that was what she said, Yi Qianqian still felt a little strange. Looking at Shinjilia, Yi Qianqian subconsciously turned her head and looked around the room. Could it be that there were surveillance cameras? Otherwise, why would old Mrs. Shin knock on their door at such a coincidental time? Shinjilia glanced at her and reached out to turn her face back. He said, Don't let your imagination run wild. Grandma wouldn't do anything perverted. Yi Qianqian blushed and pushed him away. I didn't even say anything. How did you know what I was thinking? Oomph. Don't I know you? This woman was sensitive and prone to overthinking things. You're just like a child. I only imagine all kinds of imaginary things after something happens when I'm young. You're so old, yet you still can't stop. You're the old one. Yi Qianqian spat. How am I old? Shinjilia was silent for a moment. He looked at the mound on Yi Qianqian's chest and said, You're not big. Yi Qianqian was even more annoyed. She pinched his waist and pushed him away. Get lost. Shinjilia almost fell off the bed. He hurriedly pulled her back. Yi Qianqian fell into his arms as soon as he pulled her along. Shinjilia reached out with his perverted hand and said, Big, big, big. Yi Qianqian smacked him. She was both embarrassed and annoyed. You're gonna die. Get lost. Shinjilia pinned her down and said in a low voice, If you want to get lost, then get lost. Have I ever been afraid of you? Hey, what are you doing? Take off your clothes and scram. Oh, New Year's Eve. The capital couldn't be compared to Yintown. When Yi Qianqian woke up, she saw the woman from the Shun family making dumplings. Yi Qianqian was completely clueless about such manual labor, but she still went to wash her hands. After disinfecting them, she went forward to join in the fun. Nanny liked Yi Qianqian very much, so she patiently guided Yi Qianqian on how to wrap it. Yi Qianqian looked at it attentively and wrapped a few bags. Although it didn't look good, at least it didn't leak out. Ding dong, the doorbell rang. Yi Qianqian subconsciously thought it must be the old lady's friends. Sure enough, after Shinjilia went to open the door, the people who came in were all old men and old ladies. Chapter 1911. Fortunately, they didn't seem to be interested in her. Yi Qianqian didn't make a sound, afraid that they would notice her. However, she couldn't hide from them in the end. Qianqian, come over and meet someone, Shinjilia said. Yi Qianqian finished wrapping the last dumpling and replied, Sure. She washed her hands nervously. After making sure that she was clean and that her face and hands weren't stained with flour, she walked out. Shun Julia sat in the middle of a group of old people. He looked young and handsome. When he saw Yi Qianqian, Shun Julia waved at her and said, "Come over and meet the elders." Yi Qianqian was a little embarrassed. She looked at them and said, "Hello, Grandpa and Grandma. My name is Yi Qianqian. She's my girlfriend." The old people looked at Yi Qianqian and then turned to look at each other. They seemed to be speaking in a dialect, but Yi Qianqian felt a little more at ease when she saw their eyes. They didn't seem to be particularly dissatisfied with her. "Come over here." Shun Julia waved at Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian walked over to Shun Julia and sat down. Shun Julia introduced them and said, "This is Grandpa Wang Yu." "Hello, Grandpa Wang Yu. This is Grandma Dongfang." Dongfang? Yi Qianqian rarely saw people with multiple surnames. She couldn't help but take a second look and obediently greeted, "Hello, Grandma Dongfang. This is Grandpa Nanfeng." She recognized them one by one. In fact, Yi Qianqian felt that they all looked similar and didn't remember a single one of them. The smiles on their faces were quite amiable, but for some reason, Yi Qianqian's hair stood on end when they stared at her. It was lunchtime, and all the grandparents ate. Nanny, he had woken up early to make dumplings. Yi Qianqian helped entertain the guests. Later, the guests followed old Mrs. Shun to the study to chat. It wasn't until 3 in the afternoon that the guests were sent off. An old woman with white hair and a bun held Yi Qianqian's hand before she left. She smiled warmly and said, "Good girl." Yi Qianqian was stunned. She didn't understand what she meant. She smiled, but before she could say anything, the old woman let go of her hand and left with her old companions. After Yi Qianqian and Shun Julia saw the guests off, Shun Julia turned to look at her. Shun Julia's eyes seemed to carry a strange, scrutinizing look. Yi Qianqian felt strange all over. She waved her hand and said, "What are you doing? Grandma Dongfang actually likes you very much." Grandma Dongfang has the best relationship with Grandma. She's just as difficult to deal with as Grandma. Yi Qianqian looked at Shun Julia. When Yi Qianqian heard the news, she was shocked. "Is it that strange? Then why did she say that I'm a good girl?" "I don't know either." Shun Julia smiled happily. "No matter what, it's a good thing that the old man likes you. Don't you agree?" Yi Qianqian had a nagging feeling that something was amiss. She nodded her head and said, "That makes sense." When Yi Qianqian returned to the house, old Mrs. Shun was sitting in the living room, munching on melon seeds. When she saw Yi Qianqian enter, she said, "Julia, go and cut some fruit for me." Shun Julia glanced at the old lady and then at Yi Qianqian. "Qianqian, come here." Chapter 19:12. Shun Julia glanced at her, then smiled and walked into the kitchen. "Qianqian," old Mrs. Shun called out. Yi Qianqian immediately tensed up and replied, "Yes, yes. Grandma, I'm here. Don't be nervous. Is Grandma scary?" Old Mrs. Shun looked at her helplessly and said, "Although Grandma is a little strict with you at times, it's not to the extent that you're so afraid of me now." Yi Qianqian smiled. She was too embarrassed to say anything. Yes, she was afraid. After all, she was not that strict with herself. When old Mrs. Shun saw Yi Qianqian's reaction, she laughed and asked, "You met all my friends just now, didn't you?" "Yes, I have. Dongfang is my good friend. We've known each other for decades. She likes you very much." It was Grandma Dongfang who had just spoken to him. Yi Qianqian looked up at old Mrs. Shun. Old Mrs. Shun's eyes were fixed on Yi Qianqian's face. She nodded her head and said, "You're not bad looking. You have good physiognomy. I liked you a lot when I first met you." As she spoke, she subconsciously glanced at Yi Qianqian's hand. Yi Qianqian met the old lady's gaze and opened her palm. There was a red line there. Very light, very light. Old Mrs. Shun leaned forward to take a look. Yi Qianqian was shocked and instinctively withdrew her hand. "Let me take a look." Old Mrs. Shun stood up and walked over to Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian was a little scared. When she saw old Mrs. Shun, she shrank back. When old Mrs. Shun saw Yi Qianqian's reaction, she felt a little upset. He muttered, "What are you afraid of? Will I eat you?" He reached out and grabbed Yi Qianqian's wrist. Yi Qianqian consciously opened her palm. Soon, a faint red line appeared on old Mrs. Shun's palm. It has faded. Old Mrs. Shun looked at him. How did you do this? Yi Qianqian looked at her palms. I don't know either. Moreover, has it faded? Why didn't she feel anything? It's good that it has faded. It's good that it has faded. It was as if she had been possessed by a ghost. Yi Qianqian felt her hair stand on end. This old lady was poisonous. He had only said a few words, but she was already scared out of her wits. Yi Qianqian retracted her hand and took a look at herself. Has it faded? Perhaps it was because she stared at him every day, but she didn't notice any changes at all. Old Mrs. Shin stared at her for a long time and suddenly asked, "When are you going to get married?" Yi Qianqian couldn't react for a moment. "Let me ask you, when are you planning to get married? Julia isn't young anymore. It's not good for you to keep dragging it out." Yi Qianqian felt a little confused and said, Didn't you forbid us from getting married?" "Nonsense." Old Mrs. Shun had a look of rebuke on her face as she said, "Didn't you come to our house for the new year? Do you think that just anyone can come to our house to eat and stay with us? Isn't it because you are my future granddaughter-in-law? Otherwise, I wouldn't have let you in." Yi Qianqian smiled awkwardly and replied, "Is that so? Hee, what else?" As old Mrs. Shun spoke, she took out an old almanac from under the table and said, "Let me look at the date. Just now, Dongfang said that Julia's wedding should be held in spring. It's not the new year yet, so the preparations are just in time." Yi Qianqian felt that the old lady must have seen a ghost. She had changed too quickly. Chapter 19:13. Yi Qianqian was at a loss for words. "What do you mean by divorce when you want to?" Yi Qianqian looked at the old lady flipping through the calendar. She pursed her lips and said, "We won't divorce." Old Mrs. Shun looked up at Yi Qianqian and said, "That's for the best. I do hope that you won't divorce and stay together for the rest of your lives. It'll be nice to be happy. But it's hard to change one's fate." Old Mrs. Shin didn't finish her sentence. She was focused on looking at the days. Yi Qianqian felt uncomfortable. Did this old lady really want them to get a divorce? Annoying. Shun Juliet quickly cut the fruit and inserted a few fruit forks into it. He picked up a piece of apple and handed it to Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian didn't dare take it. She glanced at the old lady. Shun Juliet said, "Grandma, the fruit is here. Okay, you guys eat. Grandma's busy." Old Mrs. Shun squinted her eyes for a while. She couldn't see clearly, so she found a box under the coffee table and took out a pair of reading glasses. Shun Julia shrugged and handed the apple to Yi Qianqian. The apple was soaked in salt water after it was cut. It tasted pretty good. Most importantly, it didn't turn yellow. Yi Qianqian took a bite. Shun Julia sat beside her and asked softly, "What did Grandma say to you?" Yi Qianqian glanced at Shun Julia and said, "That we get married." Shun Julia almost choked on the apple. He looked at Yi Qianqian in disbelief and asked, "Really?" Before Yi Qianqian could reply, Shun Julia looked at old Mrs. Shun and asked, "Grandma, do you want us to get married?" Old Mrs. Shun glanced at Shun Julia. When she saw the ecstatic smile on her grandson's face, she laughed and said, "Yes. Are you happy? Are you surprised?" Shun Julia was about to go crazy. He quickly walked over and hugged old Mrs. Shun excitedly. "Grandma, I love you." Old Mrs. Shun was enjoying it, but also disgusted. She pushed Shun Julia away and said with a disgusted expression, "You're so annoying. Who wants you to love me? Go love your wife." Shun Julia was overjoyed. He jumped up and returned to Yi Qianqian's side. He kissed her hard on the cheek and said, "Honey, I love you." "Wifey." Yi Qianqian blushed at the way he addressed her. She felt guilty and couldn't help but ask, "Can we really get married?" "Of course, Grandma said it's okay, so we can definitely get married." Shun Julia had complete faith in old Mrs. Shun. He stood up and said, "That's right. Let's talk to your father about this and make him happy." As he spoke, Shun Julia stepped forward to make the call. However, Yi Qianqian went forward to hold him back and said, "Wait a minute. Are you sure it's okay? Didn't grandmother and Uncle Blind Man say that I have to wait until I'm 28 years old?" When did I say you're going to be 28? Old Mrs. Shun looked aggrieved and said, I only said that you might not live past the age of 28. Yi Qianqian was speechless. Shun Jilier replied, You might as well say you got married at 28. Old Mrs. Shun was obviously in a good mood. She said, It doesn't matter. If you want to get married, just get married. Jilier isn't young anymore, and neither are you. It won't be too late to have children in a few years. Chapter 19:14. For the next few days, Yi Qianqian followed Shun Jilier around. On New Year's Eve, the family had dinner together. Shun Luo and rushed home, but he was nowhere to be seen the next day. On the first and third days of a new year, Shun Jilier took Yi Qianqian everywhere to play. On the second and fourth day of the new year, he would bring her around as a guest. Whenever he caught someone, he would say, My wife is getting married. When the time comes, don't forget the red packet. Yi Qianqian felt both awkward and amused at the same time. After the fifth day of the new year, Shun Jilier couldn't wait to return to Yun Town with Yi Qianqian. As soon as they arrived home, Shun Jilier carried his luggage and walked in. He called out, Uncle, we're back. Yi Jinhua was entertaining guests at home, and the neighbors were chatting happily. When they heard Shun Jilier shout, everyone looked over. Yi Jinhua smiled and said, My daughter has returned. Putting down the teacup, Yi Jinhua walked out. She asked, Dad, why didn't you close the door? What if someone came in? Shun Jilier walked into the house. Then, he entered the living room and saw his uncles. Yi Qianqian introduced them one by one before pulling Shun Jilier over and introducing him to them. This is my boyfriend. His name is Shun Jilier. You could just call him Xiao Shun. Oh, Shun. Qianqian has grown up and has a boyfriend. He's so handsome. Qianqian is also a great beauty. It's only right for her to have a handsome boyfriend. The uncles spoke in a dialect. Yi Qianqian smiled as she listened to them. She took her luggage and returned to her room. Yi Jinhua poured a cup of tea for Shun Jilier and asked, Why are you back so soon? I thought you weren't coming back. Shun Jilier smiled sheepishly and said, Qianqian will be going back to work in a few days, so I thought I'd come back to play for a few days and visit you. As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something and said, My father asked me to bring you something. I'll bring it over for you. Shun Longyue was unable to come. There were many things to do before and after the new year. Therefore, he had specially asked Shun Jilier to bring some cigarettes and alcohol. He also bought an antique thumb ring. Yi Jinhua was not interested in cigarettes and alcohol, but he was interested in the thumb ring. He took it and examined it, saying, It's really beautiful. This jade is not cheap. Yi Jinhua was smoking a cigarette. He took it out and put it out. Why are you being so polite? We'll be a family sooner or later. I haven't even paid a visit yet. He nodded his head and said, Sooner or later, we'll be family. By the way, Uncle, I'm here to tell you that Qianqian and I are getting married. Yi Jinhua chuckled. Didn't you tell me before? Shun Jilier exclaimed in surprise and asked, Did she say that? Why don't I remember? Yes, he told me a few days ago. He told me again yesterday and again today. This is the third time. Yi Jinhua smiled and shook his head. Are young people so stupid? Shun Jilier was a little embarrassed. He looked at the other uncles and asked, Uncle, how should I address them? This is sixth grade, Uncle. He introduced them one by one, but communication was a little difficult. Few of the older generation were fluent in Mandarin. Most of them spoke half-heartedly. Shun Jilier watched them speak. They were basically guessing and guessing. Fortunately, he could still guess a little. Chapter 19:15. After sending the group of uncles off, Shun Jilier stood up to see the guests out. After sending the guests off, Yi Jinhua changed the tea leaves and boiled a pot of water. When he saw Shun Jilier enter, he waved at him. Uncle. Shun Jilier sat down and tidied up the tea set that the guests had just drunk from and stacked it together. Shun, Yi Jinhua said as he brewed a cup of tea for him, I've always believed that you and my daughter would get married. I always felt that it was only a matter of time. Shun Jilier felt the same way. When he heard that, he looked at Yi Jinhua seriously and said, Uncle, I think you're very wise. I'll definitely be responsible for Qianqian. Ever since he got together with Yi Qianqian, he had not only received her first time, he had also received her entire life. Being responsible for her was also being responsible for himself. Yi Jinhua smiled and said, "I just like talking to you. You're so good at flattering me." Shun Julia was a little embarrassed and smiled shyly. Sometimes, Qianqian can be a little willful and immature. As a man, you need to be more tolerant of her. Yi Jinhua took a sip of tea and said, "Qianqian has never had a mother by her side since she was young. If you have children in the future, I'm afraid that she might not be a good mother. You need to teach her more." Shun Julia blinked. "So, he's going to be a mother?" "Ahem. I'll be rest assured if Qianqian is with you in the future. You're a responsible and sensible young man, but there's one thing I must warn you about." Yi Jinhua's expression became serious as he said, "If one day you end up with another woman, you must tell our family. It doesn't matter if it's Qianqian or me. If you really have no feelings for Qianqian and don't want to be with her anymore, you must tell me as soon as possible. I won't let Qianqian stay by your side anymore, and she won't pester you anymore." Shun Julia's heart skipped a beat. Of course, he knew that. Yi Qianqian might be with him now, but once she made up her mind, she would never turn back. Shun Julia had experienced such a thing before. Shun Julia would never want to experience this kind of sadness and despair a second time. "Did you hear me clearly?" Shun Julia nodded his head earnestly. "Got it. I'll definitely treat Qianqian well." "Humph." Yi Jinhua's expression finally eased up a little. He said, "I hope you remember what you said today. If I find out one day that you did something to let Qianqian down, I'll definitely fly to the capital and smash your head." Shun Julia was amused. Yi Jinhua looked at Shun Julia and shouted, "I'm not joking. If I say I'm going to blow up your head, I really mean it." Shun Julia was ready for battle and replied, "Yes." Yi Jinhua chatted with Yi Jinhua for a while longer. Shun Julia was basically obedient and well-behaved. When he returned to Yi Qianqian's room, he found her sleeping soundly. He had taken off his cotton-padded jacket, but he didn't cover himself with a blanket. Shun Julia was shocked. He went forward to pull out the blanket from under her and slowly covered her body with it. Yi Qianqian moaned and stretched. When she looked at Shun Julia, she yawned and asked, "Have they left?" "Yes, let's go." Shun Julia sat down beside Yi Qianqian and said, "I just had a chat with your father." Chapter 19:16. He warned me that if I didn't treat you well in the future, he would go to the capital and blow my head off. Puffed. Yi Qianqian burst out laughing. Shun Julia's face was stern as he said, "I'm not joking. He said he would blow your head off, and he meant it." Yi Qianqian laughed even louder as she asked, "What? Did my father really say that?" Shun Julia looked helpless when he saw Yi Qianqian's reaction. He nodded his head and said, "Yes, that's exactly what he said." "Yeah." However, Shun Julia moved closer to Yi Qianqian and said, "Even if your father didn't warn me, I would still treat you well. If you don't treat me well, I'll leave." "Go where?" "Run away from home." "Why would I tell you?" Yi Qianqian wrapped herself in the blanket. "If you dare to be mean to me, I'll leave. I'll leave every time I'm mean to you. Let's see if you dare to do it again." Shun Julia smiled and pleaded, "I can't afford to offend you. Your words are worse than blowing my head off." Yi Qianqian looked smug. Shun Julia felt a little emotional and said, "How do we end up together? It feels a little magical. When I first saw you, I didn't even notice you." Yi Qianqian pinched his waist when she heard that. Shun Julia dodged with a smile and continued, "But after spending some time together, I realized that you're really interesting. You're much more interesting than you, Lily." "Well, Lily is about to give birth, and you're still thinking about her?" Yi Qianqian's words were obviously sour. Shun Julia pinched her nose and said, "How is that possible? I just can't stand the fact that she's so devoted to Ming. There are thousands of good men in the world. Why does she have to be with Ming? I just don't understand. How do you women's hearts grow?" Yi Qianqian kicked him and said, "I'm different from Lily. If you treat me the way Ming treats Lily, I'll never look back." Shun Julia looked at Yi Qianqian with an aggrieved expression. Yi Qianqian replied earnestly, "I'm serious. I won't look back. It's just like you said. It's hard to find a three-legged toad in the world, But aren't two-legged men everywhere? But you'll never find someone like me. Why do I have to be like you? You've already let me down. Why should I look for someone like you? Am I going to let you down again? Yi Qianqian snapped. I'm not a masochist. When Shun Julia heard that, he realized that it made sense. Qianqian, oh, Qianqian. Shun Julia's heart was filled with both love and hate. Sometimes I envy Yao Ming. He's such a jerk and such a wretch. How could he have a silly girl like you Lily waiting for him? Maybe he's rich and handsome? I'm also rich and handsome. Shun Julia was indignant. But you're not as rich and handsome as he is. Yi Qianqian replied matter-of-factly. Shun Julia felt as if his heart had been pierced with 1,000 holes. He weakly retorted, I'm a good man. That's indeed better than him. Don't worry. I won't let you down. Shun Julia hugged her and said, if you really run away, I'll really cry. Yi Qianqian leaned on his shoulder and smiled. She looked up at Shun Julia. Sometimes she couldn't figure it out. His face was so handsome that it was eye-catching. Chapter 1917. However, Yi Qianqian wasn't the only one who couldn't figure it out. She wouldn't be able to figure it out for a long time to come. For the past few days, Yi Qianqian hadn't had a good night's sleep. After chatting with Shun Julia for a while, she drifted off to sleep. In the evening, Shun Julia woke her up for dinner. When she was brushing her teeth and washing her face, she realized that there was a dazzling array of dishes outside. They were all her favorite dishes. After a hearty meal, Yi Jinhua suddenly had the idea to take them hiking. Cloud Town was not big. There was a famous mountain that the people in the town called Spiritual Mountain. The Spiritual Mountain was called a mountain, but in reality, it was just a slightly higher hill. Because it was the new year, many people came to climb the mountain at night. The mountain was not steep, and some elderly people would come here to climb up and down. Yi Qianqian deliberately changed into a pair of flats, but before she could even get halfway up the mountain, she felt that she was about to give up. Although the mountain was not steep, it was somewhat slippery. There wasn't much concave or convex surface, so if a person was standing on it, they would easily slide down if they weren't careful. Yi Qianqian maintained her posture and didn't dare to move. She looked at her father, who was swaggering above her, and said pitifully, Dad, I can't move anymore. Yi Jinhua was obviously full of energy. He turned to look at Yi Qianqian and said with a smile, You're a young lady, yet you're losing to an old man like me. Hurry up and come up. Bulsh *T. How are you old? You look very young. Yi Qianqian's face was full of disgust, but she still gave him face and crawled a few more times. He was panting and sweating profusely. Shun Julia was the same. He let out a long sigh and said, Follow closely. Come, I'll pull you. Yi Qianqian reached out and grabbed Shun Julia's hand before walking forward step by step. Yi Jinhua saw that they were in a good mood. He sighed and said, In the past, it was always those people who came with their families. I was embarrassed to come alone. Ha ha ha. Yi Jinhua smiled and looked down. I haven't been here for a long time. This time, I came with my daughter and son-in-law. It's finally comfortable. Yi Qianqian's heart ached when she heard that. She was busy with work and could only go home a few times a year. In the past, when his grandfather was still around, he still had a companion. Now that Grandpa had passed away, Yi Jinhua was living alone at home. Yi Qianqian was still a little worried. Fortunately, he was in good health, so Yi Qianqian wasn't afraid that he would suddenly fall ill. Panting, Yi Qianqian used his strength to climb up and called out, Dad, I'll come home on the weekends to keep you company, okay? Go. I don't need your company. Yi Jinhua climbed up the mountain and said while panting, Kingstown is not close to Yintown. It's almost a 2-hour drive. It's so tiring to go back and forth. I'm not tired. Forget it. Work hard and work hard to get promoted. That's the best way to repay me. Yi Jinhua smiled. If you get promoted, I'll be able to show off when I introduce my daughter to others in the future. How great would that be? His voice was a little sweet, but the back view of him climbing the mountain looked a little frail. All alone, Yi Qianqian pursed her lips and almost burst into tears. She bit her lower lip, and her eyes reddened. Shun Julia silently tightened his grip on her hand and said, Hurry up and come up. Chapter 1918. But after thinking about it, she pushed his hand away and said, "Go climb the mountain with my father. I'll do it slowly on my own." "But you're too slow." Shunjilia frowned. "You're crawling like a tortoise. What if you get lost later?" "Impossible." Yi Qianqian glared at him. "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? The top of the mountain is only so big. How could I possibly get lost? At most, I'll make a phone call. There's no signal on my phone." Shunjilia pulled her along and said, "Let's go." Yi Qianqian was silent for a moment before she suddenly shouted, "Dad, old Shen wants to compete with you." Yi Jianhua turned around and looked over. He was amused and said, "All right, young man, you'll definitely be faster than me. I won't wait for you. Hurry up and catch up, or you'll be punished." When Shunjilia heard that, he realized that Yi Jianhua wasn't the least bit worried that Yi Qianqian would get lost or do anything else. With a smug look on her face, Yi Qianqian pushed his hand away and said, "Go on. My father is waiting for you. Just you wait." Shunjilia had no choice but to turn around and climb up. "I'm coming." Yi Jinhua's speed was very fast, and he disappeared in 2 or 3 moves. Shunjilia wasn't slow either. It was obvious that he had great stamina. Even carrying Yi Qianqian wasn't strenuous at all. Now that they were gone, Yi Qianqian was even less inclined to crawl. He took his time climbing up and rested at the same time. After about 10 minutes, he climbed back down again. When he saw Yi Qianqian, Shunjilia had a helpless expression on his face and said, "Saying that you crawl like a tortoise is too much of a compliment." Yi Qianqian looked at him with a smile. She naturally reached out her hand and said, "Hold my hand." Shunjilia was almost defeated by her. He dragged her up slowly. After trying her best to reach the top, Yi Qianqian was exhausted. However, as soon as he arrived, he was stunned by the scenery at the top of the mountain. There were many people on the mountain, but the open space was very big. Yi Qianqian looked down. All she could see were beautiful red lanterns and the deep blue sky in the distance that was tinged with pink. Below them were dark blue waves. It seemed to be the sea, but it also seemed to be something else. It was beautiful. However, there was a faint green light that was even more breathtakingly beautiful. Green light? Shunjilia also looked over, and his eyes were filled with amazement. Yi Qianqian suddenly recalled a rumor and said, "It said that if you see the green light and make a wish in time, your wish will definitely come true." With that, Yi Qianqian clasped her hands together tightly and closed her eyes. Her heart was filled with devotion. "I hope my father will be healthy and live to a ripe old age." Shunjilia glanced at her before looking at the beam of light not far away. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. Closing his eyes, Shunjilia had a wish. "I hope everything goes well." Almost at the same time, both of them opened their eyes. The green light in the distance had already faded away. Yi Qianqian's lips curled into a smile as she turned her head away. Shunjilia also looked over. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. The 7th day of a new year was a special day for Cloud Town. On this day, it was like a small festival, receiving guests, paying respects to the ancestors, and worshiping the gods were all suitable. Shunjilia and Yi Qianqian had prepared their gifts early in the morning and went to the famous house in town. Uncle Blind's house was full of people today. Chapter 1919. They brought all kinds of expensive gifts with them and lined up outside sincerely, hoping that the blind uncle would have his fortune read for them. Shunjilia was shocked when he saw it. Why are there so many people? Yi Qianqian glanced at them, then glanced at Shunjilia with contempt and said, "Look at how inexperienced you are." Of course, it's because the blind uncle is accurate. Shunjilia had never expected that the blind uncle's appeal would be so much stronger than old Mrs. Shun's. That was true. One was a true immortal, and the other was a demigod. That must be the difference, right? Shunjilia and Yi Qianqian waited outside for a long time. When the line of people dwindled, they finally walked in. As soon as they entered, Shunjilia saw the obviously worn floor tiles and exclaimed, "I finally know what it means to have the doors ill-broken." In ancient times, wooden houses must have been even worse than this. You're ignorant. Yi Qianqian glanced at him and said, Don't you see the door, Zil? I see it. The floor tiles looked very dirty, and there were even some wear and tear on them. However, the color of the door sill was very even. I don't know what it's like over there, but here, door sills can't be stepped on. Huh? Why? I don't really understand. Grandpa told me before that the door sill is like the neck of a deity. If you step on the door sill, it's like you're stepping on the neck of a deity. It's not good. Shun Julia had never heard of it before. Now that Yi Qianqian said it, he found a little novel. Carrying her gifts, she went to find the blind uncle. It was obvious that the blind uncle had been busy the whole day and was very tired. He was sitting in a chair and leaning against it. His eyes were open, but there were no pupils in them. They were just white. Yi Qianqian felt a little scared when she saw him. When she saw the blind uncle's exhausted look, Yi Qianqian hesitated for a moment and said, Why don't we come back tomorrow? Ah, you're here. It was a woman's voice. It was a woman who looked to be in her 40s or 50s. She looked like an Annie hired by the people in town to take care of the blind uncle. She walked over and asked, Are you Yi Jinhua's daughter? Yi Qianqian was a little surprised and asked, Yeah. How did you know? The old maid did not answer, but looked at the blind uncle. Uncle Blind still had the same expression, but this time he spoke in a dialect. Since you're here, come in. She didn't know why, but she had a feeling that he was waiting for her to come. She pulled Shun Julia forward and stood in front of the blind man. She greeted him, Hello, uncle. Uncle Blind finally propped himself up and said, Young lad, come. As he spoke, he waved to the front. He spoke in a dialect, so Shun Julia couldn't understand him. Yi Qianqian nudged him and said, Uncle is calling for you. Shun Julia placed the gift on the table beside him and stepped forward. Squat down, Uncle Blind said. Yi Qianqian translated, and Shun Julia squatted down. Uncle Blind Man's rough hand touched Shun Julia's face. Shun Julia quickly closed his eyes. His face hurt from the rubbing, but he didn't make a sound. He pursed his lips and closed his eyes. In next to no time, the blind uncle withdrew his hand and said, Not bad, not bad. Shun Julia understood what she was trying to say. Chapter 1920. Yi Qianqian tugged at him. Shun Julia finally stood up. He felt a little strange. Lass. The blind uncle's voice sounded like wood rubbing against cement. It was dry, hoarse, and unpleasant to the ears. Yi Qianqian replied, Yes. You want to get married? Yi Qianqian felt goosebumps all over her body. She whispered, How did you know? The blind uncle smiled and said, Don't be nervous. It's fine. I won't harm you. I know. Yi Qianqian smiled awkwardly, but she was still afraid. Give me your boyfriend's horoscope. Shun Julia's horoscope? She only knew Shun Julia's date of birth, but she didn't know the hour of his birth. She turned to look at Shun Julia and asked, When were you born? Noon. Ah, then it's noon. Yi Qianqian quickly reported Shun Julia's horoscope and her own horoscope. Uncle Blind nodded with a serious look on his face. He pinched the fingers of his right hand as if he was calculating something. It's the 5th day of the 3rd lunar month this year. It's the best day to get married. Yi Qianqian was a little surprised. She squatted down and said, Uncle, you said that I would face a tribulation when I was 28 years old. Will I still face one now that I'm 28 years old? When the blind uncle heard this, he chuckled but did not answer directly. Instead, he said, That depends on your fate and your man's fate. What does that mean? Yi Qianqian didn't understand. However, she was a little unwilling, so she asked again, Can I still have children? Fate. Yi Qianqian felt a little defeated. She stood up and frowned. When the old woman next to her saw Yi Qianqian's expression, she said, Don't be afraid. There's always a solution to any disaster. Sir, there should be a solution, right? The little girl has brought you a lot of tonics. Her father and grandfather are also very good people. Their ancestors have accumulated good karma. Uncle Blind Man only smiled and said nothing. If there was no sound, then it was the worst sound. Yi Qianqian felt that her bad habit of letting her imagination run wild was about to resurface. She stomped her feet anxiously and looked at Shun Julia. Shun Julia felt like he was listening to a book from heaven. When he saw Yi Qianqian's expression, he asked softly, "What's wrong?" Yi Qianqian's eyes reddened, and she asked, "What do you think I'll do if I can't have children in the future?" When Shun Juliet heard this, he thought that the blind uncle had said something despairing to her. He felt a little sad, but he looked at Yi Qianqian and enunciated each word clearly. "It doesn't matter. My family doesn't have a throne to inherit. Why would I want a child? As long as we're alive and happy, that's all that matters." Yi Qianqian wanted to cry even more. She asked, "But don't you really want a child?" "Nope, who told you that?" Shun Juliet looked aggrieved and replied, "When did I say that?" Sigh. Don't let your imagination run wild. If it's not, then it's not. What's important is that we're together. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but tear up. He had clearly said that. In the imperial capital, in the hotel, he told her very clearly that he wanted a child. However, it was very likely that she wouldn't be able to give birth now. What should she do? Besides, it's not up to them to decide whether we can have children or not. We can go to the hospital for a checkup. As long as there's nothing wrong with our bodies, we can definitely have children. Chapter 1921. Yi Qianqian looked at him with reddened eyes and asked, "You really don't believe me? Well, this is the era of science. Why do you believe so much nonsense?" Shun Juliet placed his hand on her shoulder to comfort her. She didn't know if the blind man understood or not, but after Shun Juliet finished speaking, he laughed and said, "I didn't say anything." Yi Qianqian's mood, which had been on the brink of collapse, seemed to have returned to normal when she heard his laugh. Looking at the blind man, Yi Qianqian asked, "Uncle, fate." The blind man still used the same words. Yi Qianqian was even more uncertain. However, no matter how much she asked or said, the blind man refused to reveal a single word. The servant next to her couldn't stand it anymore and said, "If the master is willing to say it, then let him say it. If he doesn't want to say it, then he must have his reasons. Young lady, don't ask anymore." Although Yi Qianqian was unwilling, she could only give up. In fact, she just wanted to feel at ease. After leaving the blind man's place, when Yi Qianqian and Shun Juliet returned home, Yi Jinhua had already prepared dinner. When he saw them return, he brought out the last dish and said, "Tong Tong just came by." Yi Qianqian was stunned when she heard that. Shun Juliet asked, "What did she come for?" "She came to look for you. She asked you to go to her shop after dinner if you have time." It was the Lunar New Year period, and many young people had returned home to celebrate the holiday. Fong Tong Tong's shop was very popular, so she naturally couldn't leave. Yi Qianqian understood and nodded her head. "Okay, I got it." Shun Juliet went to the kitchen to wash his hands and took out the bowls and chopsticks. He glanced at Yi Qianqian and asked, "Are you really going?" "Yes, I'll go. I'll go alone. You can stay at home." Yi Qianqian looked at him. Shun Juliet frowned and said, "No way. Didn't something happen to her when she left your house? I'll go with you later." Yi Qianqian felt a little helpless. "It's fine. I'll take the main road. There are people coming and going on the main road. What's there to be afraid of?" "No." Shun Juliet refused again. "I'll go with you." "All right." Yi Qianqian didn't know what to do with him and said, "I just think it'll be awkward if we go together." "Why is it awkward?" Shun Juliet asked. He suddenly remembered something and said, "By the way, we're getting married. Not this. The last time you broke up with me, I gave Fong Tong Tong a call." Shun Juliet scooped rice for everyone in the house before finally sitting down. Yi Qianqian blinked. She felt a little strange. What did he mean by breaking up with him? If she hadn't misunderstood his relationship with Fong Tong Tong, would she have broken up with him? But he didn't mention it and asked, and then, I think I said some nasty things. If I go, it might be a little awkward. Shun Juliet picked up his chopsticks and picked up some food for Yi Qianqian. "Let's eat." Yi Qianqian stared at the food in her bowl and asked suspiciously, "What did you say?" Based on Shun Juliet's character, what kind of harsh words could he say? Chapter 1922. Yi Qianqian replied, "That's pretty harsh." However, Shun Juliet's character wasn't bad. How angry must he be to say something like that? Yi Qianqian glanced at Shun Juliet guiltily and lowered her head to eat in silence. As Shun Juliet ate, he said, In any case, I don't have a good impression of her anymore. If she wasn't your best friend, I would have chased her away a long time ago." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Qianqian with a hint of resentment and said, "Look at you. You invited a wolf into the house and wronged me. I'll remember this for the rest of my life." Yi Qianqian felt even more guilty. She looked up at Shun Jilia weakly. Shun Jilia looked very unhappy. Even his eating speed had slowed down significantly. When Yi Qianqian saw this, she muttered, "You're a man. Why are you so petty?" Oomph. Shun Jilia was even more unhappy. "All right." Yi Qianqian reached out and tugged at his hand. "I was wrong, all right? Didn't I admit my mistake later on? Look at how well I'm doing now. I'm like a fairy." Yi Jinhua laughed out loud and looked at Yi Qianqian with disdain. As he ate, he complained, "You're so thick-skinned." Yi Qianqian stuck out her tongue and looked at Shun Jilia pitifully. Shun Jilia wasn't really angry. When he saw Yi Qianqian's expression, his expression relaxed a little. He said, "I got it. It's all in the past." Yi Qianqian breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Hubby is the best. Hubby in unformed marriage." Shun Jilia suddenly felt a little intoxicated when he heard those two words. His mood lightened up, but he still kept a straight face and coldly replied. Yi Qianqian had long seen through his thoughts. She laughed and lowered her head to eat. After dinner, Shun Jilia escorted Yi Qianqian to the back of the big banyan tree in front of Fong Tongtong's snack shop. He specially reminded her, "When you're ready to go back, you must send me a message or call me. I'll pick you up. Don't come back alone." "Got it." Yi Qianqian pushed him away. "Go back and wash the dishes." Shun Jilia had no choice but to turn back 3 times as he walked away. Yi Qianqian walked past the big banyan tree and arrived at Fong Tongtong's door. The sound was very good, and there were many young people coming and going. There were a few motorcycles parked at the entrance. Young men and women were smoking on the motorcycles, talking and laughing. Fashionable and youthful. Yi Qianqian walked over. The men glanced at her and quickly shifted their attention. Fong Tongtong, who was sitting inside, kept her gaze fixed on Yi Qianqian. Fong Tongtong waited until Yi Qianqian was right in front of her before she smiled and said, "You're here." "Yes, I'm coming." "Mom," Fong Tongtong called out and walked inside. "Qianqian, you're here. Come and take care of the shop." "Okay." Mrs. Fong's voice wasn't soft either, and it reached outside. Soon, Mrs. Fong came out. When he saw Yi Qianqian, he seemed a little touched and said, "You're here, Qianqian. Come in and have a seat. I'll take care of things here." Fong Tongtong naturally held Yi Qianqian's hand and said, "Let's go. I brought you a present." Yi Qianqian subconsciously looked at her hand, which was being held by Shun Jilia. She felt a little strange. Fong Tongtong noticed Yi Qianqian's gaze and smiled awkwardly. She quickly let go of her hand and said, "Come." Yi Qianqian followed her inside. The familiar layout didn't seem to have changed much over the years. Chapter 1923. Actually, Fong Tongtong's home wasn't here. Instead, it was in the small villa behind. After so many years, the family had been quite well off. However, he spent almost all of his time in this small restaurant, so it naturally became his second home. Inside, there was a sofa, tea set, tables, and chairs. After Fong Tongtong walked in, she took out a bag. It looked like a jewelry wrapper. "Here, this is for you." Fong Tongtong sat down on a stool. "What would you like to drink?" "I recently learned how to brew coffee. Do you want a cup?" Yi Qianqian sat down and naturally opened the gift bag in her hand. She said, "No, I won't be able to sleep later. It's been a few days, and I still need a rest." "Ah, are you not feeling well?" "No." Yi Qianqian opened the package and said, "If you want to have a child, you'll have to go to the hospital for a checkup." Fong Tongtong suddenly felt a little sad when she heard that. He looked at Yi Qianqian and asked, "Are you married?" "Not yet." Yi Qianqian glanced at her. "If I were to get married, wouldn't you know? I still have a wedding to attend." Fong Tongtong calmed down. She looked at Yi Yuyu's hand and said anxiously, "Can you do it or not? You've been tearing it apart for so long, but you still can't open it." "Let me do it." "No." Yi Qianqian turned around and avoided her lecherous hand. Can't you show some sincerity? You're just giving me a present, and you're complaining that I'm taking too long to open it. That's weird. Fong Tong Tong couldn't help but laugh when she heard Yi Qianqian's words of disdain. Yi Qianqian glanced at her and muttered, "Crazy. You're the crazy one. I'm not talking about you. Why do you have to take it personally? Bah, there are only the two of us here. If you don't scold me, why are you scolding the air? I'll just curse at the air. I'm happy to." Yi Qianqian said matter-of-factly. Finally, the packaging was removed. It was indeed a jewelry box. Yi Qianqian opened the box and saw a ruby. The ruby was not small and was made into the shape of a key. There were many diamonds on the key. Yi Qianqian was stunned when she saw it. She looked up at Fong Tong Tong and said, "You've struck it rich. Why did you give her such an expensive gift? Do you want to die?" "I didn't get rich." Fong Tong Tong's smile faded. "I just wanted to apologize to you." "Apologize?" Yi Qianqian looked at the extravagant necklace. The necklace would cost at least tens of thousands of yuan, right? Or even more expensive? Yes. Fong Tong Tong looked at Yi Qianqian and said, "I'm sorry about what happened before, Qianqian." Yi Qianqian didn't respond. She stared at the necklace in her hand and nodded her head in satisfaction. She said, "Your apology is very sincere. I like it. Of course it's enough. I bought this necklace with all my savings over the years." Fong Tong Tong had a pained expression on her face. "Damn it. I can't even bear to buy something so expensive myself." Yi Qianqian closed the lid and looked at Fong Tong Tong earnestly. She said, "Don't worry. I'll treat her well." Fong Tong Tong glared at her, but she quickly smiled. Yi Qianqian looked at her and smiled. She quickly changed the topic. She had originally thought that it would be awkward to meet Fong Tong Tong here. Later on, she realized that no matter what happened, their relationship of more than 10 years was still a relationship. Chapter 1924. Things seemed to be going smoothly. On the night they returned to Kingstown, old Mrs. Shun called Shun Julia. She looked very happy and said, "I've decided on the wedding day. It's on the 5th day of the 3rd month in spring. This is the best day of the year. According to Qianqian's horoscope, it's especially good." When Shun Julia and Yi Qianqian heard the old man's happy words, they looked at each other and smiled. The date that old Mrs. Shun mentioned was the same as the date that Uncle Blind had told them 2 days ago. On the same day. "Okay, got it," Shun Julia replied. On the other hand, old Mrs. Shun was displeased. She said, "What do you mean I know? Aren't you happy that we're getting married so soon?" Shun Julia naturally wouldn't tell her about the blind uncle. Instead, he changed the topic and asked, "Grandma, since you said that it was a good day, how was it a good day?" "Io, Qianqian, the right time and the right place are all favorable to you. Your 8 characters of the 8 trigrams can also set off Qianqian. If you get married on this day, maybe you'll have a change of luck." Shun Julia turned on the loudspeaker. Yi Qianqian's eyes lit up when she heard that. "What does that mean? Luck?" Yi Qianqian suddenly felt a glimmer of hope. The word that the blind uncle had repeated countless times appeared in his mind. Fate. If his luck changed at this time, it could also be considered fate, right? Yi Qianqian's mood suddenly lightened up. "Really?" Shun Julia was ecstatic. "Grandma, you're the best." When old Mrs. Shun heard that, she smiled proudly and said, "I'm just kidding. Of course I'm great. Oh, right. On the 25th of next month, bring Qianqian back to collect the marriage certificate." Gregorian calendar? Yes, the Gregorian calendar. Shun Julia instinctively walked over to the desk calendar and flipped through it. "There's still a month left," he said. "That's right. That's not a bad day either. It's the perfect day to get our marriage certificate," old Mrs. Shun said with a smile. "I can't talk to you anymore. I'm going to talk to Dongfang." "Wait, Grandma." Before he could finish, old Mrs. Shun had already hung up. Shun Julia had no other choice, but when he turned around, a figure pounced on him. Yi Qianqian jumped up and laughed happily. "We're getting married." Shun Julia held her firmly in his arms. Yi Qianqian was even more excited. She clasped him and shouted, "We're getting married. We're getting married. Old Shun, we can get our marriage certificate next month." Shun Juliet carried her back into the room and said, "Didn't you say that you didn't care about this ID? How did you change so quickly?" Huh. Yi Qianqian hugged his head and looked up happily. "How could I not care? You big idiot. Didn't I comfort you at that time?" Oomph. Shun Juliet placed her on the bed, but Yi Qianqian refused to let go of him. His mind was happily fantasizing about his future life. Shun Juliet's face reddened, and he said with much difficulty, "Let go. Are you trying to murder your husband?" Huh. Yi Qianqian released him and kicked off her shoes. She took off her jacket and laid on the bed with her phone in her hand. She opened the browser. Shun Juliet removed his jacket and pinned her down from behind as he asked, "What are you doing?" Yi Qianqian stared at the phone and asked, "Let me check what we need to prepare for our wedding. Are we going to do a premarital checkup?" "Yeah, we'll do it tomorrow." Shun Juliet hugged her from behind. His hand slid under her shirt, and his other hand took away her phone. "There's no rush. Leave the checkup to me." Yi Qianqian turned her head, and Shun Juliet quickly covered her lips with his. Chapter 1925. On her first day back at work, Yi Qianqian applied for leave. Although the chief editor wasn't happy, when she heard that she was going for a premarital checkup, she didn't object. Yi Qianqian and Shun Juliet arrived at the hospital early. After registering, they went straight for the checkup. After a series of tests, Yi Qianqian was very nervous. They couldn't get the report right away, so Shun Juliet and Yi Qianqian went home after the checkup. After staying in Kingstown for 2 days, Shun Juliet returned to the capital. Yi Qianqian went to work alone. She insisted on going to bed early and waking up early every day. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she found that her skin looked much better. When she got the report, Yi Qianqian immediately took it out. However, she wasn't in a hurry to read it. Instead, she called Shun Juliet. Shun Juliet seemed to be busy. It took a long time for him to pick up. It was very quiet on the other end. Shun Juliet said softly, "Give me 10 minutes. Okay." Yi Qianqian immediately hung up. She stared at the report in front of her and took a deep breath before flipping it open. She read through everything. Everything was normal. Negative. Normal. Yi Qianqian read it over and over again. Her original nervousness disappeared. She took photos of every page and sent them to Shun Juliet's phone. After about 5 minutes, Shun Juliet called back. Yi Qianqian picked up and said excitedly, "I got the report. I saw it." Shun Juliet seemed to be in a good mood. He said, "All the tests are normal. There's nothing different." "Huh. Does it prove that my body is healthy?" "Yeah." "Did you get the report on the uterus that day?" "Yeah. I sent it to you." "Yeah." Shun Juliet smiled sincerely and said, "Everything is normal. Everything is normal. You're healthy." Yi Qianqian fell into the chair. She laughed excitedly and said, "Old Shun, I miss you so much." "I miss you too." Shun Juliet looked at the calendar. "Soon. Remember to bring your household register and ID card. We're going to the Civil Affairs Bureau." Oh my, old Shun is getting married." A colleague next to him overheard and immediately began to tease him. Yi Qianqian heard it too. She didn't mind and said, "Tell your colleague that there will be wedding candies." Shun Juliet smiled. He glanced at the man and said, "Don't worry. You'll get plenty of red packets." Yi Qianqian burst out laughing and said, "Go ahead. I have to get back to work. Wait for me." "Phew, sure," Shun Juliet replied. He only put down the phone after Yi Qianqian hung up. He turned around and continued to busy himself. Yuxiao. The new year had just ended, and the surroundings were still immersed in the festive atmosphere. Su Qinci helped Nanny Rong make desserts for the children. Standing next to the stove, she slowly stirred the sugar in the pan. The small fire simmered slowly, and the fragrance permeated the air. Li Jianyue ran around with little Sue and shouted in a crisp voice, "Mommy!" Little Sue smelled the fragrance too. "She's so happy." Su Qinci smiled and was about to speak, but suddenly she felt a pain in her belly. The pain came suddenly. She frowned and slightly bent down. Nanny Rong saw this and asked in surprise, "Madam, what's wrong?" Su Qinci's face quickly paled. "My stomach hurts." Nanny Rong was even more shocked. She quickly turned off the fire and supported her. Are you going to give birth? Come, sit on the sofa. Chapter 1926. Hearing Ursu's words, Nanny Rong frowned and said, "It's not as simple as a stomachache. Hurry up and call your father." Li Jianhua had never seen Nanny Rong so serious before. She was shocked and said, "Oh, I'll go right now." Su Qianxi's situation looked bad. Her waist was slightly arched, and her belly was bulging. Her face looked a little pale, and she was holding a spoon in her hand. Nanny Rong took the spoon from Su Qianxi's hand and put it down. Then she helped Su Qianxi to sit on the sofa. Su Qianxi's belly was swollen and painful, and she held it uncomfortably. Nanny Rong knew that she was really going to give birth. She looked at Ursu and saw that she was calling Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing quickly picked up. Ursu turned on the speaker and said in a crisp voice, "Hello, Dad. Nanny Rong asked me to call you. She said that Mom has a stomachache." Li Xiqing was preparing for the meeting. When he heard this, he was stunned and said, "Your mother has a stomachache?" "Yes." Asked Nanny Rong if Mom is going to give birth. "Yes, yes, yes." Nanny Rong couldn't stand it anymore and shouted, "Sir, come back quickly. Madam looks very uncomfortable. Come back quickly and take her to the hospital." In the president's office of the LS Group, Cheng Yu walked in with the meeting materials and knocked on the door. Li Xiqing had just hung up the phone, and then he picked up his coat and said, "The meeting is postponed." Cheng Yu was stunned and asked why. "My wife is giving birth." Almost flying out, Li Xiqing soon disappeared. Cheng Yu was surprised and said, Su is going to give birth again?" She picked up her phone and called Rong Rue. After all, he was Su Qianxi's cousin, so it was necessary to inform him. She went to the conference room to inform them of the situation. Everyone expressed their blessings and then left. When Li Xiqing returned home, he ran in. Seeing Su Qianxi leaning on the sofa, he said, "Honey, I'm back." Su Qianxi glanced at Li Xiqing and said with some grievance, "Mr. Li, it hurts." Li Xiqing quickly walked forward, pushed Nanny Rong aside, and then went forward to carry Su Qianxi. "Nanny Rong, take Ursu with you." Mosin is still inside." Nanny Rong hesitated. However, Ursa looked excited and said, "Is Mommy going to give birth to a little brother? She's a little girl." He corrected her and quickly carried her out. Opening the car door, Li Xiqing thought for a moment and said, "Ursu, you stay at home with Granny Rong and Xiao Su. I'll take your mother to the hospital." Li Jianhua looked a little disappointed, but she still pouted and said, "All right then. Daddy has to take good care of Mommy." "Of course." Li Xiqing touched his daughter's head and said, "Daddy is leaving." Su Qianxi's face was pale, which made Li Xiqing feel sorry for her. He started the car and drove straight in the direction of the first maternity hospital. When she arrived at the hospital, she looked much better. He got out of the car and hugged her. "Does it still hurt?" Su Qianxi shook her head and said, "It's not that painful." Chapter 1927. The pain of a pregnant woman was sometimes heavy and sometimes light. Just lying on the bed, Su Qianxi felt an unbearable swelling pain again. It was the first time that Li Xiqing had seen her give birth so closely. His lips tightened in fear, and he said, "Doctor, hurry up. My wife has a stomachache." The nurse was a bit speechless, but she still said in a good attitude, "That's what women do when they give birth. They'll be fine after they give birth." "When can she give birth?" "I don't know yet. Her water hasn't broken yet. I guess it'll take a while." "How long?" Li Xiqing was a bit loud. The nurse looked at Li Xiqing and said, "Mr. Li, it depends on the pregnant woman. It's not up to us to decide. Some people have to give birth for a few days, but others have to give birth immediately." "Give birth immediately? A cesarean section?" "A cesarean section is also an option, but I recommend you to have a natural birth. After all, your wife had a cesarean section before, and they also gave birth here." Therefore, the nurse was very clear. When Su Qianxi gave birth for the first time, this man was not by her side at all. The way she looked at Li Xiqing was also a bit strange. Li Xiqing nodded, as if he was thinking. Su Qianxi was lying on the bed, looking very pale. "Mr. Li, please stay here with your wife. If anything happens, Just press the service bell. What do you mean? The nurse held back her laughter and said, for example, the pregnant woman can't stand the pain, or her water breaks, or any other emergency. You can go out. Su Qianxi's voice rang out. Let my husband stay here. The nurse felt relieved and said, okay, call me if anything happens. After the nurse left, Li Xiqing sat on the edge of Su Qianxi's bed. Su Qianxi looked at her husband, feeling both amused and distressed. She reached out and touched his face. His first child was already absent. This time, he was nervous and flustered, and Su Qianxi saw all of it. Don't be nervous. It's not that painful, she comforted him. Li Xiqing suddenly laughed. Why are you comforting me now? Humph. Su Qianxi's face was pale, but she was in good spirits. Look at yourself. Can you comfort me now? Li Xiqing caught her hand and kissed it gently. Don't I look bad now? Su Qianxi smiled and said, no, my husband is always the most handsome. Li Xiqing curled his lips and looked at her belly. His stomach looked round. It was huge. However, compared to the first twin, it was undoubtedly much smaller. Bite me if it hurts. He looked at her with concern. Your lips are blue. Of course not. It's over if my lips turn blue. Su Qianxi's mental state was not bad, but suddenly it began to hurt again. I don't talk. Save your energy. He held her hand and sat next to her. Su Qianxi's heart was warm. At least this time, he was by her side. After another 2 hours of pain, Su Qianxi's water broke, and the doctors and nurses sent her to the delivery room. After a series of procedures and disinfection, Li Xiqing could enter the delivery room. Chapter 1928. At that moment, Li Xiqing's mind was blank. But at the same time, he felt that his life was complete. It was as if he could feel every inch of Su Qianxi's pain. But it was so far away, and he wished that he could replace her and let all the pain fall on himself. She did not give birth until it was very, very late in the evening. It was a natural birth. Su Qianxi's face was pale and relaxed, but Li Xiqing felt that he had been tortured to the core. Holding Su Qianxi's hand, Li Xiqing did not speak for a long time. Hubby, yeah, I'm hungry. She sounded aggrieved and faint. Li Xiqing suddenly smiled when he heard that. Nanny Rong is here. Li Xiao and Qin Shuhua were waiting at the door of the delivery room. Nanny Rong sat with Mosin and Daisu until the door of the delivery room opened. Almost at the same time, everyone stood up and carried a chubby boy. It's a boy 6 and 2 pounds. Great! Qin Shuhua laughed excitedly. She went forward and carefully carried the child over. How is the adult? Li Xiao asked. Is my son in there too? Yes, but he's about to be transferred to another ward. He'll be out soon. The nurse smiled and reminded them of the precautions. Li Xiao actually did not understand these things, but Qin Shuhua nodded. Mosin turned his head and looked at Ursu. He said, Mommy gave birth to a little brother. Yeah, I heard that. Is the brother called Sansu? Qin Shuhua laughed and said, he's called Little Mayun. Little Mayun, Big Mosin. Yay! Li Jinhua cheered and took out her little phone. I'm going to call brother. If he hears this good news, he'll be very happy. Nanny Rong looked at the children and said with a smile, by the way, tell your grandparents not to worry. Both mother and child are safe. Yeah, Li Jinhua made the call happily, feeling that she had been entrusted with an important task. She called Li Jianxian, and he picked up very quickly. Brother, a crisp voice sounded. When Li Jianxian heard that, his originally unhappy face softened a little. He said, yeah. Brother, let me tell you, Mom gave birth to a little brother today. Grandma said his name is Little Mayun, and Brother Mosin is Big Mosin. Li Jinhua smiled and asked, Brother, what are you doing? However, Li Jianxian didn't reply. Instead, he quickly changed the topic and said, Little Mayun is born. Have you told Grandpa and Grandma? No, brother. I miss you so much. Li Jinhua pouted. Brother, when are you coming back? Li Jianxian lay on the small bed and looked at the photo not far away. He whispered, I just came from Kingstown. Then, Big Brother, when are you coming back? Wait for the holidays. Then, Big Brother, when are you going to have a holiday? Let's wait for Brother to graduate. Li Jianxian looked at his little desk, which was filled with all kinds of junior high school textbooks and questions. I want to go back and see little Mayan too. I didn't see it either. I'll go and take a photo of little Mayun and send it to you. All right, just you wait. Li Jianxian removed the phone from his ear and ran towards Qin Shuhua. Grandma, I want to take a photo of the little brother and send it to brother. Looking at Li Jianyue's expression, Li Mosin suddenly thought of a phrase. Two innocent children. Ursu and Daisu's relationship was too close, and the time they spent together couldn't compare to the strong familial love between them. Chapter 1929. Qin Shuhua helped Li Jianyue take a few photos of little Moyun's face and then handed the phone to Li Jianyue. Li Jianyue happily sent the photos over and then used WeChat to send a voice message to her brother. Brother, I think little Mayun doesn't look like us at all. We look much better. Li Jianxian didn't reply. In the capital, Li Jianxian looked at the ceiling above his head and was slightly distracted. Even when the phone next to him rang, he ignored it. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Li Jianxian immediately sat up and became alert. Come in. As soon as the childish voice fell, the sound of the door being opened was heard. Rongxian walked in and looked at Li Jianxian before closing the door. Hello, Grandma. Daisu. Rongxian walked over and sat down on Li Jianxian's little bed. Li Jianxian's lips were tightly pursed. I'm sorry, Grandma. Rongxian looked at the child and sighed. Your mother gave birth today. It's a little brother, so I didn't tell your father about you. However, you really shouldn't have hit your classmate like that. I was wrong. Li Jianxian lowered his head and was very honest. You're different from Chu. Chu's parents have always been abroad and don't care about him. I know that you're close to him, but I think it's better for you to keep a distance from him. Rongxian looked at Li Jianxian and said seriously. When Li Jianxian heard this, he looked up and looked at her in surprise. Grandma, we hit him today because Wang Shengbin came to provoke us. Li Jianxian's little face was a little unconvinced. He said that Chu was an unwanted child and that I was a little monster raised by an old witch. After we hit him, he even spat on us. I was very angry, so you hit your classmate until his teeth fell out and his face was swollen. He might even have a concussion. Rongxian was a little angry. Li Jianxian, what did Grandma usually teach you? A gentleman uses his fists, not his mouth. Not only did you hit him, but you also hit him until he was hospitalized. As she spoke, she looked at Li Jianxian with some disappointment and said, You weren't like this in the past, Daisu. It's all because of Yu Chulin. Grandma, no. Yu Chulin used to have violent tendencies. He looks quiet, but he's actually mentally deficient. His father has mania, so it's best if you don't hang out with him anymore. Li Jianxian couldn't believe that Rongxian would say such a thing. Grandma, okay, don't talk about it anymore. Come with me to the hospital tomorrow to apologize to her. Rongxian stood up and looked at him. If a fool is scolding you, just ignore him. Treat him as a mute. Treat him as a lunatic. It's his family's problem if he's not educated, but if you hit him, it's your fault. Li Jianxian was not convinced. He pursed his lips and did not speak. Rongxian bent down and put her hands on Li Jianxian's shoulders. Daisu, you're still Grandma's good boy. Go to bed early. Good night. Chapter 1930. Daisu, it's because you're friends with him that you chose to believe him. Rongxian looked at Li Jianxian and said, I know you won't listen to anything I say now, but Grandma has to warn you. Don't contact him anymore. Do you hear me? Grandma, I don't agree. Calm down first. School will start in a few days. You have to prepare well. Grandma, I want to skip a grade. You have to talk to your father about this. Rongxian looked at Li Jianxian and said, Go to sleep. Good night. The door to the room was closed. Li Jianxian looked at the dark surroundings and suddenly felt a little sad. Mom, I want to go home. Li Siqing carried the child until late at night. The newborn's body was as soft as a piece of cotton. He held it carefully, afraid that he would hurt the child. Qin Shuhua watched from the side, and her heart was in her throat. She said, Slow down. Slow down. Li Siqing was already nervous, and after hearing Qin Shuhua's reminder, he felt even more uncomfortable. Su Qianxi had fallen asleep, but when she heard the movement in front of the bed, she woke up again. Seeing that Li Xiqing didn't dare to move, she smiled and said, "Don't be afraid." Her voice was very soft. Li Xiqing quickly came over and smiled at Su Qianxi. Then, the child in his arms began to struggle. His little hands and feet flailed, and his wrinkled face turned slightly red. Then, he opened his mouth and burst into tears. Li Xiqing's body stiffened and he asked, "Why are you crying? Are you hungry?" Qin Shuhua heard that and said, "Hurry up and carry the child to Qianqian. Feed him." "Oh, okay." Li Xiqing carefully carried the child over and said, "Honey, feed him." Su Qianxi slowly sat up, and Qin Shuhua went up to help her. Li Xiqing handed the child to her. When Su Qianxi took it, she could clearly feel the man's hand tremble slightly. "Don't be afraid. The child is very strong." But this adult had scared the hell out of him. After feeding the child milk, little Mayun instinctively sucked on the milk and closed his eyes in satisfaction. But after a while, he began to cry again. Su Qianxi touched his diaper and found that it felt a little wrong. She said, "Does the baby need to change his diaper? Take a look." Li Xiqing hurried forward to hold her and said, "Ah, diaper change, Mom." Qin Shuhua had just walked out to coax her granddaughter. Hearing his voice, she immediately responded, "What's up? Please tell me to change my diaper." Qin Shuhua almost laughed and said, "Wait a minute." Li Jianyue walked forward and stared at him with her big, round eyes. "Daddy, are you going to change little brother's diaper?" "Yes, Ursu, go out first. It will stink." Li Jianyue's eyes were wide open, but her eyelids were starting to drool. She said, "I'm not afraid of the stench. I want to take a video and send it to my brother. It's a video of Daddy changing my little brother's diaper." Li Xiqing's expression changed. He coughed softly and said, "What's there to see? Don't take pictures, Mosin." Li Mosin responded from outside, "Take your sister out. Let Granny Rong take you home to sleep. It's getting late." Chapter 1931. Li Jianyue's innocent and cute words made the adults around them laugh. Li Xiqing deliberately put on a straight face and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Don't be rude." However, Li Jianyue wasn't afraid at all. She was grinning from ear to ear. Li Mosin pulled Li Jianyue and said, "Ursu, let's go back first. Daddy has to take care of Mommy and little brother here. Let's go back and play with little Sue." Nanny Rong also came up and said, "Ursu, let's go. Don't make trouble here." Li Jianyue was a little reluctant, but she still pouted and said, "Okay, then when will Daddy and Mommy come home?" "Nanny Rong, why don't you stay here and teach Xiqing? Mom, you could bring the children directly back to the old mansion." Su Qianxi's voice was soft as she looked at Qin Shuhua. "Yes, Mom, I think so too." Qin Shuhua heard that and nodded. "Okay, in that case, Nanny Rong can stay here. I'll bring the two children back first." After the discussion, the place was much quieter. Nanny Rong smiled and looked at Li Xiqing. "The children's skin is more tender. Be gentle." Li Xiqing's movements were very gentle. When he heard Nanny Rong's words, he didn't dare to use any force. Nanny Rong couldn't stand watching him being so careful. She said, "Let me do it. Watch me. You'll be able to learn it next time." There was a training center for parents before, but Li Xiqing was busy with work and it wasn't his first child, so he hadn't been there. One reason was that he didn't have time to come again, and the other was that he was embarrassed. Nanny Rong's movements were very smooth and looked gentle and fast. Li Xiqing watched carefully. Su Qianxi looked at her man, and her eyes softened. When Li Jianxian and Li Jianyue spoke, Li Xiqing was not by her side. Although he didn't say it, Su Qianxi knew that he must be very regretful. This time, the harder he tried to make it up to her, the more Su Qianxi felt guilty. Back then, Li Xiqing disappeared for 4 years because he wanted to protect her. Li Xiqing seemed to feel Su Qianxi's gaze and looked over. Her dark, almond-shaped eyes curved slightly. Then, she turned her head and watched Nanny Rong's movements. "Did you see it clearly?" Nanny Rong glanced at him. Li Xiqing nodded and said, "I think so. I'll try." Little Mayun's eyes were wide open as he stared at Li Xiqing. Li Siqing couldn't help but reach out and touch his little face. Call me Daddy. Little Mayun immediately opened his mouth, and his face turned red. Then, he opened his mouth and burst into tears. Su Qianxi laughed out loud, but Li Siqing panicked and said, "Why does this child cry?" Nanny Rong tried not to laugh. "That's what kids do. Go on." Li Siqing wiped his little butt and carefully put a diaper on it. Nanny Rong couldn't stand it anymore. "Hurry up. How's the class going?" Sweating, Li Siqing took a deep breath and tried to move faster. But in the end, she was still afraid of hurting the child, so she couldn't get up no matter what. Perhaps little Mayun was tired from crying. After a while, he closed his eyes and fell asleep with tear stains on his face. Finally putting the diaper on, Li Siqing wiped his hands, his face covered with sweat. Nanny Rong said, "Put on the child's clothes. Don't let him catch a cold." Li Siqing did as he was told. Although it was clothes, it was actually a layer of swaddling clothes. I have to explain that I was out the whole day, and when I came back, I realized that 60 chapters had been deleted. Because it was an anti-pornography campaign, the deleted chapters should be sexual ones. Chapter 1932. He put the child on the small bed next to him and asked Nanny Rong to take care of him. Only then could Li Siqing wipe his sweat. Su Qianxi still didn't look too good. Li Siqing sat by her bed with a little heartache and said, "You've worked hard, my wife." Su Qianxi pursed her lips and smiled. "You've worked hard too." Hearing that, Li Siqing blushed inexplicably. He coughed and said, "Are you tired? Sleep for a while." Su Qianxi smiled and responded softly. Nanny Rong saw that and said, "What are you sleeping for? Eat something first and preserve your strength. Otherwise, you'll be exhausted." Then, she picked up the tonic soup and said, "Have some soup first." "Sir, feed madam some." "I don't want to drink it." Su Qianxi looked at Nanny Rong. "I'm sleepy." "No, you must drink it." Nanny Rong was rarely so firm and strict. "If you don't drink it, don't even think about sleeping." Seeing Nanny Rong like this, Su Qianxi had no choice but to sit up. After drinking some soup, Su Qianxi couldn't stand it anymore and fell asleep on the bed. Seeing her asleep, Li Siqing stood up and walked over to the child. Looking at little Mayun's sleeping face, his mood quietly started to become better. His son was born, and he had watched him. "Honey, I want to eat something sour and spicy." "Oh Ming, you bastard, you're hiding my ice cream again." "Tcho, where's my waist pad?" Oh Ming had been very busy recently. It was said that pregnant women were difficult to handle, and he had experienced it firsthand. Not only did her taste change, but her temper was also volatile. Oh Ming couldn't handle this kind of situation at all. The O residents had sent an extra nanny. Oh Ming had to go to the company during the day and come back at night to accompany his wife. It was fine when Lily was in a good mood, but when she was in a bad mood, Oh Ming didn't have a good time. "Ah, honey, where's my candy?" Lily had lost something for the umpteenth time, and then looked at Oh Ming with a face full of grievance. Oh Ming was used to it. He looked at her and said, "You can't eat candy. You have to exercise more." Before she was pregnant, she was only 40 pounds at her fattest. With a height of 1.6 meters, this weight was quite thin. But after getting pregnant, not only did her belly get bigger, but her whole body also swelled up like a balloon. Now Lily weighed 110 kilograms. Her whole face was round, and she had a big belly. It was hard to imagine that she used to be thin. The last few times you went for a prenatal checkup, the doctor told you to exercise more. Your blood sugar is a little high, so you're not allowed to eat sweets. Lily looked at him and pouted as she asked, "Do you think I'm fat?" In the past, when she was skinny, he despised her for being too skinny. Now that she was fat, he despised her for being fat. Could they still play happily? When Oh Ming heard that, he snorted. "Why did you ask if you knew?" He pulled his wife over and said, "I've fed you until you're full. Come, let's take a walk outside. Don't eat anymore." "But I want to eat candy, just one." "No. At a time like this, I can't spoil you. Mom is coming over later, and it'll be time for dinner. Let's go for a walk first." Lily's eyes lit up. She smiled and said, "Yeah. When is Mom coming?" Chapter 1933. Lily took Ming's arm and said, "Oh, she is your mother. Since she is your mother, she is my mother. Why are you jealous? It's so boring." Umph. Ming glared at Lily, but soon turned his head and said, "I have to ask Mom to make less delicious food later. It will be difficult to give birth." "No," Lily said indifferently. "Anyway, I am ready for a cesarean section. It is very painful to have a natural birth." Qian had a natural birth this time. "I heard that it is much more painful than a cesarean section." Ming glanced at her, and his lips curled up slightly. Because they were all pregnant, several expectant mothers had created a WeChat group. Among them, Lily was the group leader. There were 4 women in the group: Yu, Su Qianxi, Qiuman Yu, and Lily. Qiuman Yu was a military doctor, so she didn't spend much time in the group. However, Su Qianxi often shared her mother's happiness with them, as well as the things that a mother needed to pay attention to. Lily was very open in the group. After listening to Su Qianxi and Yi Yu's teachings, she didn't take Ming's warning seriously at all. Ming was helpless, but he couldn't help but feel happy for her. Although she came a little late, she was still Lily's best friend, wasn't she? In the end, Ming dragged Lily out of the door. Although it was a walk, Lily didn't want to walk at all. Her footsteps were very slow. Ming waited beside her, and he also looked very slow. Lily was waiting for him impatiently, and then she would ask to go home and wait for Qiao Ziqing. However, Ming not only didn't show any impatience, but also looked at Lily with interest. He raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, "Why don't you walk?" Lily pouted and walked slowly. She didn't want to walk at all. Looking at Ming, she said, "Honey, I am tired." "But you walked less than 300 meters, Ming said. We walked out of the house, and it is a full 500 meters. It is so far. How long do you want me to walk?" Lily said bitterly. Her face was wrinkled, and she looked at Ming pitifully. Ming stood beside her, looking very calm. "No, it's only about 200 meters. Let's go." "I don't want to go. My legs are sore." Seeing Lily acting so coquettishly, Ming couldn't bear to see her like this. He said, "Let's head home." Lily's previously bitter face immediately brightened up. She said, "All right, hubby. Mom should be here soon. Let's go home and wait for her." With that, she let go of Ming's hand and walked home with light footsteps. Where was the look of someone who looked like he was about to die after taking 2 steps? Ming stared at her back and followed her helplessly. "Didn't you say you were tired?" Yes, so I have to hurry home and sit down, or I will be exhausted." Lily looked serious and looked at him with a bright smile. Lily was out of breath as she quickened her pace. The baby in her belly seemed to be a little unhappy and gave her a kick in the belly. Lily stood still and looked at her belly. She exclaimed in surprise, Ming, come and see. Your son is kicking me." Ming wasn't far away. When he heard that, he quickly ran over and shouted, "Where?" Chapter 1934. Haha. Lily looked at Ming gloatingly. When Ming saw Lily's expression, he gritted his teeth and said, "If you give birth to a son, I'll beat you up." If you dare to beat my son, I'll beat you up." Lily put her hands on her hips and looked at Ming with arrogance. As she spoke, she swaggered in the direction of her home like a local tyrant. After the new year, the weather was particularly good. For the past few days, the sun had been shining brightly. The weather was clear, and Lily's mood was naturally better. Recently, Ming had strictly controlled her diet. He even restricted her from eating more than 1 piece of meat. Therefore, Lily looked forward to Qiao Ziqing's visit every day to break her taboos. When Qiao Ziqing arrived, she led Nanny Zhang to prepare a large table of dishes for Lily with a smile. Lily ate with great enthusiasm. Although most of the dishes were Nanny Zhang's handiwork, without Qiao Ziqing, Lily would not have been able to eat so much. After eating, Ming wanted to take Lily for a walk. Lily felt a wave of discomfort in her stomach. At first, she thought she wanted to go to the bathroom. After hiding in the bathroom of the room and sitting for a while, he felt that something was wrong. The pain in her stomach was getting worse, and Lily couldn't take it anymore. She held onto the door and walked out, shouting, "Help!" Everyone was busy working, and Ming was talking to Qiao Ziqing. When he heard Lily's cry, he immediately panicked. He quickly ran up and saw that Lily was about to cry. He asked, "What's wrong?" "My stomach hurts." Lily looked at Ming with a pitiful look and clutched her stomach. Ming was shocked. He quickly went up to hold her and asked, "Is the baby about to go into labor?" "But it's not the due date yet." Nanny Zhang heard the movement from below and ran up. She said, "Lie down first." "Don't worry." "Why are you lying down? What if you give birth later?" "It won't. There are still 7 or 8 days before the due date. The closer it is to the due date, the lower the fetal position will be. It's normal to have a stomach ache. Lie down for a while. If it still hurts later, we'll go to the hospital." "Really?" Ming found it a little mysterious. Nanny Zhang glared at him and said, "I have experience. You can't go wrong trusting me." "Yes, some things. It was always right to believe in the older generation." He helped Lily lie down. As expected, Lily quickly fell asleep. Ming breathed a sigh of relief, but he was also speechless. Walking out, Nanny Zhang looked at Ming and said, "I was right, wasn't I?" "Yes, I fell asleep." Ming laughed bitterly and took out a cigarette. "Thank you." Nanny Zhang glanced at him and said, "Don't stand on ceremony with me, but it's best if you don't smoke anymore. It's not good for pregnant women and children." "Well, I don't smoke." Ming put the cigarette in his mouth and sat down on the sofa without lighting it. After smoking for so many years, it was impossible for him to quit just like that. But for the sake of his wife and children, Ming had been much more well-behaved recently. Mrs. has gone back. "Young master, the next time Mrs. comes, don't let her buy so many ingredients. It's not a waste, but it's not good to let Lily eat too much." Chapter 1935. Nanny Zhang glanced at her and said, "Hurry up and coax her. The labor pains before childbirth are also very uncomfortable, especially for those who have never given birth before. I'm afraid she can't take it." Ming had already stood up and walked over. Lily was lying on her side on the bed with a painful look. When she saw Ming coming over, she said, "I think I'm going to give birth. Honey, I'm bleeding down there." Ming was shocked. He looked down and saw some bloodstains. Not many, but there were some. Lily wanted to get up, but her stomach hurt badly. Ming picked her up and hurried downstairs. "Nanny Zhang, help me get the key. I'll take her to the hospital." Lily was wearing a pink cotton nightgown. Nanny Zhang took a look and saw the patch of red behind Lily. She exclaimed, "Oh, there's blood." She found the car keys for Ming and opened the door for him. "Hurry up. It'll be troublesome if your water breaks." Lily's stomach hurt badly. "Didn't you say that the due date is still a few days away?" "It's only a few days away. The baby is full term, so it doesn't matter which day it is." Nanny Zhang comforted him and helped him open the car door. After letting his wife in, Nanny Zhang said, "I'll go and lock the door. I'll take care of Lily. Let's go to the hospital together. A crude man like you won't know anything." "All right." Ming agreed without even thinking about it. After Nanny Zhang locked the door, she hurried to the back seat. The pain in Lily's stomach became more and more unbearable. With a bitter face, she said, "I'm never going to have another child again." "Ba ba ba." Nanny Zhang smacked her lips and said, "Don't say such things now. Don't scare the child too much to come out." Lily grimaced, but it was really painful. It hurt so much. Halfway down the road, Lily suddenly felt water flowing down. But strangely, it didn't hurt as much now. Lily leaned on Nanny Zhang, gasping for breath. There was a layer of sweat on her forehead. "Oh, young master, hurry up. If you don't hurry up, how can I make it in time? My water has broken." "What?" Ming's face suddenly changed. He accelerated the car to its maximum speed. In the blink of an eye, he had already run several red lights. He didn't know where the information came from, but it was almost instinctive and deep-rooted. He believed that if her water broke and she hadn't been sent to the hospital, then it was a very serious matter. Ming's heart was getting more and more flustered. He had to drive fast, but he had to drive steadily. When they finally arrived at the hospital, Ming carried Yulili out. His face was pale with fright. He yelled, "How can there be so much blood?" Yulili's nightgown was stained red. It looked bloody and wretched. Red liquid continued to drip down from the Ferrari and flowed down to the ground. Yulili's expression didn't look too good. Suddenly, Ming thought of the past. Didn't the television dramas and movies she watched with Xiao Ziqing when she was young have the female lead bleed to death during childbirth? Don't worry, this isn't blood. How can it not be blood? Do you think I'm blind? Ming roared. He ran to the hospital with a pale face and shouted, "Doctor! Doctor!" When he was sent to the emergency room, the nurse took a look and wrote down a record. She said, "Send her to the delivery room to open the cervix first." Then she looked at Ming and asked, "How long has her water broken?" Chapter 1936. Hearing such fierce words, the nurse was speechless. She explained helplessly, "Mr. O, it's not all blood. The pregnant woman's water broke and mixed with blood looks a little scary, but in fact, it's normal." When Ming heard that, his brows furrowed deeply. He was skeptical. "And your wife's is relatively normal. There's nothing special. Don't worry, leave it to us. You wait here." As she spoke, she had already registered and turned to follow Yulili's bed. Nanny Zhang felt helpless and amused and said, "Master O, you sit here. Women don't give birth so quickly." "No, I want to go in." "No, it's bad luck for a man to go in when a woman gives birth." Nanny Zhang held Ming back. "You can't go in." "Why not?" "When second brother's wife gave birth, second brother also squatted in there for a long time." Ming was not convinced and shouted, "How can that be the same? Second brother's wife is having a second child. When second brother's assistant gave birth, her man also went in with her. That's because she didn't have an elder to guide her. She doesn't know that it's actually not good for men." Ming asked, "Nanny Zhang, why did I bring you here?" Nanny Zhang was speechless. By the time Xiao Ziqing arrived, a long time had passed. Ming had signed the papers, and his heart was burning with anxiety. Nanny Zhang held him back. When she saw Xiao Ziqing coming over, she said, "Madam, quickly stop Master O. This guy always wants to go in. How can a man go in when a woman is giving birth?" Hearing that, Xiao Ziqing immediately went up to Ming and said, "No, you can't go in. If you go in and distract Lily, if the child doesn't come naturally, it's all your fault." Hearing that, Ming finally became obedient. But soon, Ming began to refute and said, "Then why can second brother go in to accompany his wife to give birth? His wife gave birth to a second child, so she has experience and strong willpower. Your wife gave birth to a first child." Xiao Ziqing analyzed the situation seriously and looked at Ming. "And don't you know your wife? Maybe she was born fine. What if you go in and she starts wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf? When that happens, she'll really be distracted. How are you going to play?" Ming was convinced. He pursed his lips and said nothing. Staring at the door, Ming sat on a chair outside. He waited from afternoon to night. With a cigarette dangling from his mouth, Ming was extremely anxious. Staring at the door of the delivery room, she stood up repeatedly and paced back and forth. Looking at the time, it was already past 8 in the evening. Ming felt more and more uneasy and said, "Why isn't it done yet?" Nanny Zhang glared at him and said, "How can a woman give birth in a hurry? Some women give birth for a week." 1 week. Ming's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, you really don't believe me. There really was a woman who gave birth for a week." It was a little uncomfortable, but at least she gave birth to the child. How are you going to eat and drink for a week? How'd she get up? Ming couldn't imagine it. Doesn't the pregnant woman feel uncomfortable? Chapter 1937. Ming was speechless. Actually, he wasn't in a hurry, but Nanny Zhang's words made him even more nervous. Ming took the cigarette out of his mouth and twirled it in his palm. "It's been so long. Is Lily hungry?" "Don't worry. She can't even wait to give birth. She won't feel hungry at all." Nanny Zhang's words made Ming feel even more anxious. Qiao Ziqing saw Ming's expression and said, Nanny Zhang, don't scare him. Lily is in good health. Who knows, she might give birth soon. Don't worry. Yeah, Ming replied calmly. His pacing back and forth became more and more irritated. They waited until 9 p.m. when Huijin came over and said, It looks like she won't be out for a while. Hurry up and eat something. Your health is more important. Qiao Ziqing glanced at Ming and saw that he was extremely nervous. Ming clenched his fists and paced back and forth. It was as if he hadn't heard Huijin's words. Qiao Ziqing called out to him, and Ming suddenly raised his head. Ming, go eat first. Ming glanced at them and said, You guys go ahead. I'm not hungry. I'll wait here for you, Lily, to come out. Wait for you, Lily, not wait for the child. It seemed like there were only a few words different, but the meaning was worlds apart. Qiao Ziqing was both relieved and distressed. Huijin said, We'll bring some back for you later. No need. I'll wait for her to come out and eat together. Ming glanced at them. Mom, is it really painful for a woman to give birth? It's very painful. Qiao Ziqing glanced at him. Humph. You didn't feel any pain when your mother gave birth to you. Now that your wife is giving birth, you're like this. How realistic. It was a simple joke. Ming couldn't laugh at all. He twitched his lips and waved his hand. Hurry up and go. I'll let you know when she comes out. Huijin and his wife saw this and left with Nanny Zhang. Ming paced back and forth outside many times. It was not until 11 o'clock in the evening that the door of the delivery room was opened. Ming's eyes lit up. He quickly went up and asked, How is it? Congratulations, it's a little princess. Little princess? Little princess. Ming was ecstatic and shouted, A girl? Princess? My God. He stepped forward and took a look at the baby in the swaddling clothes, but he quickly looked away and said, Where's my wife? She's inside. Someone will push her out. I'll take a look at the child first. She'll be transferred to another ward later. The nurse held the child in her arms and looked at Ming strangely. Aren't you going to hold your daughter? Okay. Ming reached out his hand, but his eyes kept looking inside. Can I go in and see my wife now? Wait a minute. Why don't you hold your daughter first? The nurse leaned over. Do you want a wife instead of child? Ming was a little embarrassed as he looked at the red-faced child in front of him. Soon, his eyes overflowed with a sincere smile. He hugged Zhang Xin carefully. Be careful. The pregnant lady is coming out. Make way. There was the sound of wheels being pushed. Ming immediately looked away and saw Lily on the delivery bed. He quickly walked toward her. Chapter 1938. Ming quickly stood still on the spot. Looking down, he saw the child in his arms who had his own blood. A smile appeared on his face as he looked at the slightly wrinkled little face. Then, he carefully followed. Lily had already fallen asleep and was lying on the bed. She didn't look well. His phone rang, and Ming jumped in shock. He quickly turned off the sound and placed the phone by his ear. Hello, Mom. Where are you? I heard that you've recovered. I brought some soup for Lily. Ming gave Qiao Ziqing the room number and quickly and carefully sat down with the child in his arms. He had never liked children since he was a child. Other than Li Ziqing's 2 children, he had never been close to any other children. Ming had never seen such a small child before, let alone held one in his arms like this. Ming couldn't help but laugh. He wanted to tease the child, but the little child had been sleeping with his eyes closed. He was very quiet. You're acting like a fool, a soft voice said, and Ming immediately raised his head. Lily glanced at Ming and said, It's a girl. Yeah. Ming's face bloomed with joy. I like girls. As if she understood Ming's words, the baby in the swaddling clothes moved and opened her eyes. A pair of clear eyes looked a little swollen, and her little mouth was slightly pouting. Her pink cheeks were even more pleasing to Ming's eyes. Our daughter is so beautiful. Ming held the baby and said, Come, call me Daddy. Lily laughed and said, If I call you now, you'll be scared to death. Ha 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 ha. Ming laughed happily. He looked at his daughter and asked, Why aren't you crying? Lily was speechless. Are you hungry? Mommy want to get you something to eat. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Ming reached out and touched Lily's forehead. Why is it so cold? I'll get you some hot water. Give me the child. Lily held out her hands. Ming looked at the child and then at the water dispenser not far away. He reluctantly handed the little baby in his arms to his big baby. Ming placed the child by the pillow and stepped forward, saying, "Sit up first. Come on." Lily only felt a pang of pain. He helped her sit up carefully, and he put a few pillows behind her. She held the child in her arms. His small, weak body and big, clear eyes clearly told Lily that she had given birth to a little life of her own. It was a wonderful feeling. Lily suddenly felt that she had matured a lot. The corners of his lips curled up unconsciously as he asked, "What's our daughter's name?" "Smile." Ming was pouring water. When he heard this, he turned around and laughed like a fool. "I've been thinking about it for a long time. I was just waiting for you to wake up to tell you. Her nickname will be Xiao Xiao. I'll think about her real name later." "Yes, Xiao Xiao." However, as soon as he shouted, Xiao 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 suddenly struggled and started crying. "Wow, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" Ming walked over with a glass of water. "Don't you like the name? Then Daddy will get another one." Chapter 1939. Owajin came in with 2 thermos flasks. They looked very large. Xiao Ziqing was in front, her eyes fixed on her precious granddaughter. A smile bloomed on her face as she said, "Oh, you're so pretty. You look like Daddy and Mommy." Her little face turned even redder from crying, and her little hands and feet moved. She didn't have much strength, but Xiao Ziqing was even happier when she heard that. She said, "Hurry up and drink some soup. The child is going to be hungry." Owajin placed the bowl on the table. Ming went forward to open the lid and help his wife drink the soup. Lily had no strength at all. She leaned against the side of the bed and didn't want to move. She said, "I have no appetite." "No, you have to drink some." Xiao Ziqing's tone was firm. She didn't allow any room for negotiation. Giving birth is like taking a trip to the gates of hell. If you don't drink some, it'll be troublesome if something happens to your body later. Be good and replenish your energy before you go back to sleep. You'll recover faster that way. Lily pouted, but she still took the bowl of fish soup from Ming's hands and took a sip. She didn't know if it was a psychological effect, but she didn't feel anything when she wasn't drinking. Now that she had a mouthful of soup, her stomach started to feel hungry. Xiao Ziqing glanced at it and said, "Eat some fish and other nutritious dishes." Mom, did you forget to add salt again?" Lily held the bowl. The more she drank, the more tasteless it became. "It's so bland. You can't have salt." Xiao Ziqing carried the child. "Ah, I'll get the nurse to ask for some milk. Hurry up and feed the baby some milk later." Lily's face fell. "Why don't I just feed the baby? Isn't breast milk the most nutritious? You have to be able to produce milk first. I'm afraid there's no milk now." Xiao Ziqing carried the baby and walked out. Nanny Zhang had already left work. Owajin looked at the time and said, "It's getting late. Ming, stay here and take care of your wife. I'll get Annie Qing to take care of her later. She'll stay in the hospital for a few days before going home to recuperate. Your mother's health isn't good. I'll take her home first." Ming was speechless. Lily drank the soup and nodded. "Okay, then let Aunt Qing come here quickly." "Dad, I don't think Ming can handle it. I don't trust the special nurse." "All right." Owajin looked at Lily and smiled kindly. "Thank you for your hard work." Lily was a little embarrassed and said, "I'm a woman. Let's go. Take care of your wife." Owajin patted Ming on the shoulder. "You don't have to go to the company for now. If I can't handle it, I'll pass it to you." "Dad, there are a lot of things you can't handle." "Impudent." Owajin glared at him, but he quickly chuckled. "Sleep early." "Good night, Dad." Lily waved. "You're in good spirits." A nurse walked in. "How do you feel?" "Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" The nurse did a simple check and left. Xiao Ziqing came back with the baby in her arms. However, the baby had already fallen asleep and seemed to have eaten his fill. "I bought a breast pump. You can give the baby milk after you pump it out." "Yes, Mom," Ming said. Also, the special nurse will be here in a while, but you must take good care of the baby. I'll get Annie Ching to come over as well. She'll be here later. Yes, Mom, Ming said. By the way, Lily. Chapter 1940. This was the first time that Lily and Ming had become parents, so they were unfamiliar with many things. For example, changing the baby's diaper, feeding the baby, and waking the sleeping baby up to drink milk. Everything seemed novel and inevitable. After staying in the hospital for 5 days, Lily's condition was much better. After leaving the hospital and moving to her home, Lily felt a lot more relaxed. The baby had always been sleepy. Apart from eating all day, he only slept. He spent very little time awake. At one point, Ming thought that his child might be a fool. However, when he heard that it was normal for newborns to be sleepy, he was relieved. Yi Qianqian and Lily hadn't seen each other for a long time. When she heard that they had a daughter, Yi Qianqian was very envious. She went to Ming's house with Shenjilia and brought a lot of gifts. Lily was still in her confinement period, so Ming's mother was very strict and didn't allow Lily to leave the room. Shenjilia couldn't see her at all, and Yi Qianqian was too embarrassed to enter their bedroom, so she simply played with the child in the living room. The newborn child was covered in a layer of pink, and her skin was so transparent that her blood vessels could be seen. Xiao Xiao's skin was very white, just like Lily. She looked beautiful and obedient. Her eyelashes were long, and her eyes were closed as she slept. Yi Qianqian's heart was about to explode. She's so cute, old Shun. Look. Yi Qianqian hugged Xiao Xiao. She looked so much like Lily. Shenjulia glanced at the child's face, which obviously hadn't grown up yet, and asked, "How can you tell? They both have 2 eyes, 2 noses, and 1 mouth." This small face was very young and tender. The features looked small, but when put together, there wasn't much recognition. Yes, they look alike. Look. Yi Qianqian looked left and right and confirmed. Look, they look like Ming too. Look at the nose. Ming's nose is very high, Shenjulia said. The nose hasn't grown out yet. How can you tell? Yi Qianqian glared at him and said, "Can't you have a little imagination? Look at the shape of the nose. It's so similar to him. The eyelashes are so long, so similar to Lily's. Look at the mouth. It's small and also like Lily's." Shenjulia replied, "Well, if you say so." Ming stood to the side and watched them bicker. He snorted and came forward to carry his daughter back. He said, "Of course my daughter looks like me. It's said that daughters take after their fathers. I can't tell now, but when she grows up, she'll definitely be a beauty." "You don't really look like a beauty." Shenjulia leaned back on the sofa. "Lily, on the other hand, is quite pretty. Well, your future children can't look like you. Yi Qianqian is quite cute. If they look like you, they'll be ruined." Ming didn't even raise his eyebrows as he teased his daughter. "Don't you agree, Xiao Xiao?" Yi Qianqian laughed and said, "Ming, why don't you move Lily somewhere else? I'll go talk to Lily." "Go in. It's fine. There's nothing to hide inside." Ming glanced at her. Xiao Xiao was born less than a week ago, so they can't have sex. Chapter 1941. Lily had long known that Yi Qianqian was coming. Ming came in to inform her. She even changed her clothes and combed her hair to make herself look clean and tidy. Unexpectedly, Yi Qianqian still hadn't shown up. She had just sat down on the bed in disappointment when she heard a knock on the door. Ming had entered the room and made some noise, but he would never knock on the door. Only Yi Qianqian would knock on the door at this time. Lily's eyes lit up, and she said, "Come in." Sure enough, the door opened. A head popped in. When Yi Qianqian saw Lily, she smiled brightly. "Qianqian, my God, you become prettier." Lily looked as if she had seen a ghost. She covered her mouth and said, "You've lost a lot of weight." Yi Qianqian subconsciously touched her face and looked at her body. She said, "No, it's just your imagination. How long has it been since you last saw me?" "It's true. You've lost weight." Lily stepped forward and pinched her chin. "You used to have 2 chins, but now, get lost. You're the one with 2 chins." Yi Qianqian slapped her hand away in annoyance. Yu Lily laughed and reached out to pinch Yi Qianqian's chest. Ouch, they've grown bigger. Yi Qianqian blushed and quickly closed the door. She covered her chest and said, "Are you done yet? Aren't you ashamed?" TSK, TSK, TSK. Yu Lily stared at her. Why is your skin so thin? Oh no, it's all over. Love really makes people vulgar. You've changed. You're the vulgar one. You've changed, Yu Lily said with a pained expression. Shun Jilya has trained you to be such a little woman. It's so scary. Why didn't I know he had such tricks up his sleeve? Yi Qianqian's face darkened. Why are you getting more and more shameless? You used to be more like a little woman than me, but now you're like a hooligan. How am I a hooligan? How did you lose so much weight? Did you lose weight? As Yu Lily spoke, she brought out a stool for her. Yi Qianqian sat down and shrugged. No, I just learned to keep fit from Shun Jilya some time ago. I stopped eating snacks and started exercising. F***CK. This isn't considered losing weight. Yu Lily was envious and jealous. She pinched the flesh on her waist. Look at how fat I am. You're different. You've already given birth to a child. It's normal for you to be fat. If I want to have a child, I have to train my body a little better. Yi Qianqian was a little envious. Do you think fate really exists in this world? Of course, Yu Lily blurted out. When she saw the complicated expression on Yi Qianqian's face, she immediately corrected herself and said, For this kind of thing, it exists if you believe it, and it doesn't exist if you don't. Why do you ask? Did Shun Jilya's grandmother read your fortune before? What did she say? Me? Yu Lily thought about it and said, She said that my fate before I was 25 years old wasn't very good. After that, my luck changed. I think it was quite accurate. Didn't she say that I might be infertile? Even the doctor said that the possibility of me getting pregnant wasn't very high. But when she read my fortune, she said that I would give birth to a son and a daughter. After the wedding, I found out that I was pregnant. Yu Lily shrugged her shoulders and looked at Yi Qianqian. Did the old lady read your fortune again? Yi Qianqian suddenly felt like crying. Yi Qianqian could be said to have seen Yu Lily's fate from the perspective of a bystander. Chapter 1942. It was so accurate that it made her hair stand on end. Sometimes, Yi Qianqian felt that she was overthinking things. But it turned out that it was better to believe in such things. One look at Yu Lily showed that it was true. When Yu Lily saw Yi Qianqian's expression, she knew. She asked curiously, What did she say? I sob. Yi Qianqian felt uncomfortable and said, She said that I might not live past 28 years old, that I'm short-lived. Yi Qianqian hadn't even told Yi Jinhua about it. She was afraid that the old man would worry. Apart from Shun Jilya, herself, and the blind uncle, only the Shun family knew about it. Now, Yu Lily was one more person who knew about it. Indeed, when Yu Lily heard that, her eyes widened and she said, No way. How is that possible? You don't look like someone who's short-lived. Yi Qianqian looked at her with grievance. What you think is useless. I think I'm doing very well. But there seems to be a turning point in the future. She said that I might be infertile, or that I might die early, or something else. But that kind of thing is probably not very accurate, right? Yu Lily coughed and said, Yes, it's true if you believe it. If you don't, it's not true. Old Mrs. Shun is a bit like a fraud. I don't think it's very reliable. Yeah, Yi Qianqian agreed. I think so too. Under such circumstances, we can only wait and see. Anyway, I don't really believe it. You shouldn't believe it. Yu Lily glared at her. When are you getting married? Marriage? It's still early. March 5th. Ah, there's only a little more than a month left. It's not early. You have to be mentally prepared. Getting married is very tiring. I know. Yi Qianqian yawned. I'll take it one step at a time. I'm so tired. Why? Shun Jilya didn't let you sleep? Yu Lily smiled ambiguously and gently touched her. Yi Qianqian blushed and said, Are you going to die? How can you say anything now? It's nothing. We're all adults. Who doesn't know that? Yu Lily smiled. But, have you gone to the hospital for a checkup? Didn't they say you might be infertile? Didn't you go? I want to see a doctor. Everything is normal, but I can't get pregnant. Yi Qianqian rested her chin on her hand and was a little puzzled. I've always calculated the danger period and the safe period, but I still haven't gotten pregnant. No protection. No. Yi Qianqian still felt a little embarrassed to answer such a question. Her cheeks were slightly red. Lily could tell what he was thinking. She laughed and said, "Your skin is getting thinner and thinner. Shun Julie is really something. His methods are really impressive. He's managed to train our tough girl to this extent." Yi Qianqian was speechless. "But according to what you said, both of you are planning to get pregnant, and there's nothing wrong with your checkup. Could it be that Shun Julie?" Yi Qianqian widened her eyes and looked at Lily. She had never considered this possibility. Shun Julie would have a problem? Pooh! How could there be any problems when he was so energetic and lively, as if he couldn't wait to kill her in bed? However, doubt was like a seed. It was easy to implant, and slowly it began to take root and sprout. After verbally denying the possibility, Yi Qianqian was a little distracted when she got home. Shun Julie finished cooking and called out, "It's time to eat. I'm so sleepy. I can't take it anymore. I'll go to sleep first." Chapter 1943. After placing the last dish on the table, Shun Julie untied his apron. Yi Qianqian sat on the sofa. When she looked up, she saw Shun Julie carefully arranging the bowls and chopsticks. Good man, good man. But ever since she had returned from Lily's place, Yi Qianqian had felt that something was wrong. She had been with Shun Julie for a long time. Except for the time in the beginning, she had not deliberately used contraception. But even after such a long time, Yi Qianqian had not shown any signs of pregnancy. There was nothing wrong with her body. It had been checked. Then, the more Yi Qianqian thought about it, the more likely it seemed. She stood up and went to the kitchen to wash her hands. As she washed, she thought about how to tell Shun Julie. Shun Julie had already filled the bowl with rice. When he saw that she was a little distracted, he asked, "What's wrong?" Yi Qianqian quickly came back to her senses and said, "Nothing." Shun Julie sat down and placed a bowl of rice in front of her. "Are you in a bad mood? Did you get upset at Lily's place today?" Lily had given birth to a daughter, but they had not done anything. Yi Qianqian didn't know, but Shun Julie himself was quite upset. Yi Qianqian glanced at Shun Julie and pouted. "How could I be upset? I just feel that there's something. What is it? What is it?" Yi Qianqian didn't know either. But if she said it, would it affect Shun Julie's mood? But if she didn't say it, Yi Qianqian felt that it would affect her mood. Thinking about it, she felt a little depressed. Yi Qianqian didn't answer. Shun Julie frowned and asked, "What is it?" She quietly looked up at Shun Julie and found that he didn't look too good at the moment. He reminded her, "I feel that if I say it, it might affect your mood." It was rare for Yi Qianqian to be so hesitant. Shun Julie looked at her and didn't know whether to laugh or be annoyed. After a moment, he said, "Go ahead." Yi Qianqian picked up the bowl and took a bite. She chewed the rice in her mouth and whispered, "I'm thinking about the problem of the child." Shun Julie relaxed and said, "Huh. Actually, you already guessed it." Yi Qianqian had been unhappy and distracted ever since she returned from work in the afternoon. It was most likely because of this matter. It was expected. Shun Julie took a sip of soup and waited for Yi Qianqian to continue. Unexpectedly, Yi Qianqian widened her eyes and looked at him. She asked, "Didn't we go for a checkup earlier? There's nothing wrong with my body, right?" "Yeah," Shun Julie replied. It was as if he already knew what she wanted to say. Raising his eyes, he stared at her. Yi Qianqian felt as if she had been seen through. He coughed lightly and said, "Then, we haven't used any contraceptives for so long, and we still haven't gotten pregnant. I'm thinking, is there something wrong with your body?" Shun Julie paused in the act of eating and put the bowl down. The delicious soup in his mouth suddenly became unpleasant. Sure enough, it was a sentence that affected his mood. He put down the bowl and looked at Yi Qianqian. "Did you hear it from Lily?" Yi Qianqian smiled awkwardly and didn't reply. "You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.